All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this is the 347th meeting of the New York Comics and Picture Story Symposium. This is a series of talks with people who make comics, artists who might work in comics form or think about comics, writers about comics, people who are interested in comics, publishers, distributors, all kinds of people involved in comics in some kind of way. And they're asked to give a completely free form discussion, maybe about their work, maybe just about a topic they're interested in. This series was founded a decade ago, a little bit over a decade ago, by a cartoonist and educator, Ben Catcher. My name's Austin English. I am curating this season and hosting it. And I really feel lucky to host tonight's meeting with Tim Goodyear, someone whose art and thinking about comics has been very impactful to me over the years. I met Tim, I believe it was 2007 or 2008, and I met him through someone who was also, Tim is a artist and a publisher and someone who works in comics and also makes art. I met Tim through Dylan Williams, who was also an artist and publisher. And Tim and Dylan's ideas and thoughts about comics expressed through the work that they did as publishers and as artists was very formative to me. Just admitting some people in from the waiting room. They both did work in comics that one way to describe it might be to say that there's a political content to what they did, but not in the sense of their political. Sorry, I just have to. People are coming into the waiting room, so I just have to mute people as I'm doing this. Not political in the sense that they made a comic about climate change, or they published a comic about climate change, and were political in that sense. More in the sense that they had a view of creativity and how to work with other people's creativity in comics that was very different than how other publishers and artists thought of things. And I think as publishers, them being artists was a big aspect of how they worked with other artists. And I think they both had a deep feeling for comics past, and weren't snubbing their nose at comics past, but they were also looking directly at work that was being made now that kind of unraveled certain narratives about what comics past might be. Looking at work now that might unravel the conservatism embedded within the comics medium, while not looking back at the history of the medium and decrying it all as conservative. This real holistic way of looking at comics present and past, that they expressed both through their art and through their publishing, that was very impactful to me. And I think meeting Dylan and Tim together, I knew Dylan before, and I think in the things that Dylan and Tim did together, they co-published work, just a couple of books, I believe. But their partnership was really discussing things and working together in ways that maybe weren't recorded through publishing. And I think certain partnerships that happen in that way, sometimes people are inhibited by the other person, or there's things that happen in the partnership that diminish one person's expression, or vice versa. But I think with Dylan and Tim, they really helped each other articulate what they were both up to in a very strong way. And it was very impactful to me. Tim started his publishing company, Teenage Dinosaur, in, you were saying 2005, Tim? He's giving me a thumbs up. 2005. And Tim published a lot of, he published early work by Dash Shaw. I believe he published Dash Shaw's first book. It should be noted, I don't want to pigeonhole Tim to this, but it should be noted that he published Boys Club #1 by Matt Fury. I believe the first long form work published by Matt Fury, and a comic that has had a pretty deep impact on culture outside of comics, which we can hopefully talk about more in the talk. He also published early work by many other cartoonists that people would be aware of today. And I think, but he's continued to publish constantly in ways that I think his aesthetic has changed over time. He's published this book by an artist, Amy Q-Tab. It's one of my favorite comics that I've read in the last decade. And Tim is also, you know, an artist that I think most people are probably more aware of the work that he's done in this book. This is his book, Video Tonfa, which I've read through many, many times. If you're not familiar with this book, I encourage you to look it up as soon as possible. And I think there's an attitude expressed in Tim's work about creativity and about art in general that syncs up in a really, to me, important way with what he does outside of his own art. I am going to read, I think, a very quick bio that Tim provided, which I think is less official than what I just said, but I think is very interesting. Tim wrote this as his bio. For this talk, Tim Goodyear loves comic books since Howard the Duck #6 and only wants to help you find that strange truth and confusion that he did that day. In a second, I'm going to turn things over to Tim. But I just want to say with the symposium, and people who have attended other editions of it are already very familiar with this. The symposium is supposed to unite the audience really with the presenter. So questions that you have while Tim is talking, please, we really encourage you to write them in the chat after the discussion with Tim is over. Any questions written in there will be voiced. You can either read them yourself. If you want to read them yourself, just note that in the chat. If you want me to read them, I'll read them for you. But we are going to, let me just admit one more person. I'm going to kind of just start things off with Tim by bringing up something we were talking about before. We were talking about kind of the notion of publishers in comics and how what publishers think of the idea of taste and how different publishers in comics treat each other. We were talking about things like that yesterday.
Yeah, well, I mean, those are really big ideas, I guess. And hello to everybody that came. Thank you for coming. Taste is a really interesting idea because, I mean, it's only for you, right? It's not, I mean, if someone like else likes your favorite food, does that really mean anything about your relationship with them?
Well, what do you mean taste is only for you? Do you mean that, I mean, I think most publishers think when they think of taste or what they think of what they mean by taste, they think that they're making their taste public. So, you know, to them, taste isn't just for them. It's something to be, it's something to be served up and shown as something important. It's not just food that you're eating for yourself. It's food that you're preparing and you're very proud of, and maybe you want to win an award for the amazing food that you made.
So, I mean, yeah, I think that's interesting. And those ideas to me come, let me get this out of here for the moment. I think that those ideas are more attached to people who only have that form of relationship with comics, where publishing is their only thing that they're doing with comics. So in that regard, you know, I think it is maybe more important for them to put their stamp on it in some way, or to really align their ego with their taste. And I don't really think that your ego and your taste are necessarily good bedfellows. And I think a lot of people are embarrassed about their taste, you know? A lot of people will tell you that they like this movie, but that it's really bad, you know? And I guess maybe that ties in with what you were saying. I was talking about movies and things, but usually when people bring up these things, if something is good or bad, there's usually like this distinction also of the budget, you know? It's cheap.
Right.
None of these really have anything to do with like the quality of what you're tasting or what you enjoy. So I think that's something that's nice for like Dylan or myself or for you, is that as artists and publishers, we get to kind of touch different parts of these relationships where it's not just about sort of like serving yourself, you know?
Well, I think one thing, like when you're talking about like the idea of like, oh, I like this movie, but you know, it's the budget's bad, so it's really corny, but I still like it, or something like that. There was, I mean, maybe that leads into, I think, something that was important for me to talk about with you, where I remember there was a reaction after Sparkplug, Dylan Williams' company ended. There was someone talking about it in retrospect, and they were saying, oh, Dylan worked with people who, they weren't ready to be published, but it's so great that Dylan worked with those people because it really encouraged them. And now they're ready to be published, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a statement of taste too, that there's a certain kind of work that, that is refined enough to be published. And then there's certain work that should be encouraged. But what I know from Dylan was that his attitude of work that might be unrefined to others was really the key work to dismantle other ideas about comics, or to the work that were not ready to others was very ready to him, perhaps more ready than other work. What do you think of
that? I feel like statements like that person's statement is like, those are born from us sort of learning so much, like generationally at least. I don't know what what it feels like for younger people to kind of analyze comics now, but for us, we pretty much got handed what the corporate mind state was for comics, and so we got how to draw comics the Marvel way or whatever. But that's like how a company runs their business, I mean, who's ready to be published for them is just that. That's all there is to it. It's purely like a financial idea, I guess. Like the whole thing is just completely financial for them, right?
Well, you don't think that they can take certain styles that, quote unquote, whatever that means, might not be ready, however you define that, and make it saleable?
But I mean, yeah, that's the thing. It's like, it's art. When's it ready?
Yeah.
Like,
well, but I mean, in their
artists, we're like totally at odds with that constantly. So I mean, yeah, I think that those kind of ideas are pretty much bullshit. Like, it's this is ready, or that's not ready, or this person's not ready to be published. Like, I can understand the idea of like, maybe they shouldn't be overexposed before they're like mature or something like that, like they're not ready for like how fucked up the marketplace is or something like that because they're 5 years old or something. I mean, that's like maybe a concern that maybe I could understand somebody making like parentally, but I mean, this is that person just sort of exhibiting their taste. Like, I don't think that this is good enough to publish, but who cares what you think? That has no value. And I mean,
what about
you place value on it by publishing stuff, but I mean, if you're not going to publish something because you're afraid that somebody else is going to react to it, then I mean, that kind of publishing is really screwed. Like, those guys are in deep shit.
When people are, when small publishers, maybe publishers in our world that are noticeably smaller than an outfit like Fantagraphics or Drawn Quarterly, when publishers are coming in and publishing people that have done mini comics, what do you think the benefit for the artist of being published by a smaller company rather than, self-publishing their work and working out a system of their own? Is that something, in the time that you've been, you've done Teenage Dinosaur, for the time that you've done it, how do you think things have changed about how, just a day-to-day thing of someone publishing their work on their own and sticking to publishing it on their own versus having a small publisher work with them? Is that, I think there's obvious, I think we can all just come up with obvious reasons why that's helpful to people. But I'm also curious, maybe what aspects of it are maybe inhibiting to people, or what about self-publishing doesn't necessarily work for some people, even though, or in their mind, it might not work for them, but maybe it really should work.
Well, I mean, I'm not a good businessman at all. And that's sort of built into the Teenage Dinosaur model. So, I mean, I can understand why somebody else would be like, I can't really do this part of the job. I can't hustle this stuff. I can't go and talk to these distributors and all this stuff. So, I mean, it kind of depends on your personality. It would be better for everybody else if they did, because then they wouldn't have to like give their cream to somebody else, the distributor and the publisher take just enough so that you pretty much never get anything because of comic size. But, and I think this came out in a conversation that we had before where it was like, you know, you were buying some mini comics from an artist and you were paying them, and then you were selling them and you were getting paid, and you both got paid. And then you published some stuff with them. And as a publisher, it's like, oh, well, I'm like a couple grand in the hole on this, so I'm gonna have to chisel my way out. And that's something that really doesn't turn out too well for a lot of us if we don't have a big enough machine going. So it's a really weird balance. I think, I think you were frustrated because you were like, now I can't pay them because I'm in the hole. So now they have a book, they can't get paid, and I'm in the hole over it. And so now neither of us are making money. Like, that seemed like a bad move, and that made a lot of sense to me. But that being said, you want to make art. You're supposed to be making art. That's your job as an artist. You know, it's not. It's hard to like work doing all of that and then go and do all the sales and everything and all the mail orders and everything. I mean, I know you're doing a lot of mail orders, and I don't know how that affects your art, but you know, I see that affecting people all the time, and that's really significant. So I mean, maybe that's something a publisher can take off your plate, is all that kind of bullshit burden. But there's these interesting ideas of what a publisher are or is also in comics, and it's, until I was a publisher, I was definitely a part of that group, and I think there's sort of like a daddy kind of perception, you know, like, do this, you know, pay for this, like, solve that big problem for me, like, kind of, but like, get me my allowance and get me my meals kind of thing. Like, that's what we all sort of fantasize a publisher's going to do, right? Is like, kind of clear away your problems and, you know, make it easy for you to kind of go play in the backyard and whatever, do your thing.
Do you think, I think sometimes though, I think that's not even the biggest expectation from people being published in the sphere of comics that you and I both work in. I think it's more an expectation of validation. I almost don't think people, sadly, I think I almost wish that people that were going to be published by a small publisher did expect more, you know, that they were going to be taken care of financially and maybe flown around to different shows and stuff. But sadly, I don't even think people truly expect that. And I think that's an indictment in some ways of the economics of these things. But I do think people want, I think they want, and this isn't true of everyone, but they want to believe, they want to proof that what they're doing is valid to someone outside of themselves. And the reaction of people in their lives reading their mini comic, or maybe slowly building an audience very gradually, is somehow less impactful than an outside source paying, you know, a certain amount of money to print copies of their book. To me, that seems like the big expectation.
I think that there's something interesting that happens in there with that expectation that like the publisher is going to make you big and cut you checks. Is that and that's something that's really good about doing it yourself is the cartoonist is always the best salesperson for the book. You know, wherever you go, when someone finds out you make a comic, they're going to want to see it. So if you have it, you can probably, you know, sell that to that person right away. And this is a really great way to like reach, you know, non-comics people, is to just sort of have your comics with you. And I think once somebody's got a publisher, they really see that sort of there's like this kind of giant sort of distribution going on, you know, like you'll see like, oh, someone in Japan has my book, you know, someone in Europe has my book, like, holy shit, that's crazy, you know, somebody in Brazil saw your book, you know. But like, those are the things. But it also can maybe kind of cut out how much you are powerful in selling your art and how useful you are in selling your art. I feel like the artist is the number one, you know, salesperson for the comic. And so for them to not recognize that power is, I think, detrimental. But to kind of like, you know, I mean, these are all weird ideas. I mean, when I'm talking about publishers in a lot of ways, I'm not actually talking about what I do.
Well, how is what you do different from what you're talking about here? Because I gave a very brief sketch of what you do, but it's not, you know.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, it's very weird. It's almost maybe like a form of a grant where I put together a print run of the book for you, and then I give you half of them, and then it's over.
Yeah, it's all settled up.
And a big part of that is relying on that idea that I was talking about it's like the artists, they have that half the print run. A lot of that was based off of me running into ideas where I would hear people talk about publishers and their publishers and getting screwed and, stuff like that. The book sold out and I never got anything, how did that happen? And I was like, geez, I don't want to do all this work and have someone hate me and talk shit about me everywhere I go, or everywhere they go, rather.
Yeah.
So maybe selfishly in that way, I kind of tried to insulate myself a little bit by being like, how can I make it very clear that I'm not even going to be able to screw you over? And so I don't own anything. I don't own the rights to anything. I don't own any of your shit. We do it. I give you half. That's it.
But of course, there's going to be some. Because I've published books with that same plan because you mentioned it. It seemed. I think it seems like a perfect. It's such a perfect system.
It's not a perfect system, but
well, it's also. I think it appeals to comics people because it's so clean. It's not like you have to keep. Comics people. I think. They hate anything complicated. So like keeping track of royalties and all that stuff. It's like, oh, this solves that.
I'm not good at doing that paperwork. I'm not going to do, quarterly reports or even annual reports. It's a weird thing. I'm responsible in that I'm not going to like go and screw up your stuff, but I'm not going to be like a proactive business person. I'm not a businessman. Like I don't publish as a business. I publish more as like a religious pamphlet kind of scenario. I might be more like the Jack Chick model in that regard. Maybe he makes money. I don't know.
Well, that's actually, there's a follow-up question that I was getting to, but it actually makes me want to bring up something more important that you brought up. Well, when we were talking yesterday, you mentioned something offhand about how you've gotten to the point where I believe you said that you've integrated comics into every aspect of your life, right? And you're
I'm not forcing it. I'm trying to not force it upon people and things, but
no, you weren't saying you were forcing it.
There isn't much else that doesn't connect back, but that might just be because of how much, me just seeing that as comics,
But but what do you mean by that exactly? Where just, in every aspect of your life, like, I mean, is it in how you think about your day, or is it in how you think about, like, do you bring comics into, I'm just interested in that idea, like how you think of it in your own minds.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know what attracted me to comics initially, but yeah, it's just, it works better for me to think about things in that way, in the comics form, or with the comics language rather. So, it's what's that? Maybe like doing some like not like William Blake level, but I'm like kind of projecting comics on things, where it's all like see, directions, and it's like, oh, wouldn't it be great if this was just like a picture of the exit that I needed, and it just said what the exit was, and you just had a picture of the intersection each time instead of like all this maps and stuff. And that was just totally my brain turning it into like, what if it was a comic?
Yeah.
So it's just sort of a thing that works really well for me. Sorry, I kind of forgot exactly what was the point on the end of that question.
No. You were just talking about, well, it relates to the art you make too, where you write, in this book, you write reviews of film, and you don't just write consumer guide reviews of film. You write, to me, you write about the art of film in this way that there's something about art that's important beyond whether it's enjoyable, whether it's good, whether it's bad. There's something there's something about the quality of the day you were having when you were watching the film. Maybe the film, maybe you phased out of the film, but there's something you remember about the tracking that was not necessarily pleasurable, but important to you in some kind of way. So it's this very, to me, it's a view of art that I really relate to. And we can talk about that view of art as being beyond whether it's good or bad. But you also, you write these and you redraw the cover, and they are, to me, these are comics in the sense that you hand letter them. You use your own lettering. And so you've taken this idea, you could easily, maybe have a film blog where you wrote these. And because the perspective on film is unique, that would be enough, that it would still be art it would still be an artistic project. And you could have a drawing there too of the cover, but you make them in this way, filtered through comics, but not in a traditional way of making comics,
No, and it was not, that was not an intentional thing. And somebody had said that it was comics once, and I started to argue against that point. But I realized that was just rude, and I would let it be, But then later on, I was just sort of pondering that, scratching my head over that. And it makes sense, though. That's the language thing coming out. Like, that's not, I wasn't trying to make it like a comic, but it's a bunch of drawings that add up to something, and writing that adds to that too. So, I mean, how is that technically not comics, I guess? But I've never gone out and been like, this is a comic. It's not something that I don't see it directly as that, but it clearly has all the elements. And yeah, for me, that was my sketchbook, and I decided to turn it into life drawings of the video boxes. And then I never would read the captions on the back because it's bullshit, or it ruins the movie. So yeah, I just felt like I should probably, those are more maybe just my opinions. And then every once in a while I feel bad where I'm like, oh shit, I should probably tell them what actually happens in the movie, and you'll see oh, and it's about this and this and that. And if you're into that, that's fine. But that good and bad thing comes up again. And that was a nice return to the beginning of what you were asking.
I mean, that comes through when I read that book, that comes through very, very clearly. I mean, you don't make a point of it. You don't ever say, it's not important whether I like this or not. You don't, it's not a thesis that's trumpeted very loudly, but it's very, it's a book that's just, in terms of thinking about art, has been influential to me. And I know it relates to ideas you have about working with other people. I would assume it relates to ideas you have about working with other people's work. So I'm curious to know how far. I mean, you're saying that it is in there. I'm not so far off in picking up on that.
I mean, that's just me talking about movies and trying to fit it in the space, essentially. But it is the same thing, though. It's just whether or not I like it. I mean, is your favorite food an actual quality food? These are not something that holds up usually when you ask somebody. They're not going to tell you the healthiest food that they eat necessarily. I mean, maybe in this modern kind of fake health culture mania we have, maybe they will, but it's almost always kind of trash or something. A frozen Take 5 was my favorite food, and that's a candy bar. I just can't eat them anymore physically.
Yeah.
But or it was mashed potatoes. It's just it's not like I was picking these great healthy foods. These are just the things that I liked, and you just like what you like. And I feel like that's valid right there. This class system on art is not necessary, and I don't think it's useful or healthy either. I mean, every once in a while I get these different reactions from that book. Someone will be like, oh man, I checked out this movie because of the way you talked about it, and they dug it. And I was like, oh, well, that's cool. I wasn't even necessarily going for that, but I'm glad that they found something they liked. But then I'll also get these responses where someone's like, whoo, thanks for writing that down. Yeah, now I don't have to watch that one.
Mhm.
you know, like I took a bullet for them kind of or something, you know? And so it's a real mixed bag, but I feel
Yeah.
like movie reviews oftentimes and art reviews oftentimes are, again, it's like sort of that the problem that can come with being like an editor or a publisher only is it's like that becomes who you are. That becomes like your ego is attached to your opinion or your taste. And like, you know, that becomes like some kind of chess piece for you. And then like you can get caught or something, you know, like, gotcha.
Right. It becomes like an
Like you
authority.
said, you know, Jeff Darrow was better than Mobius. And then you told me nobody was better than Mobius. Like, what's up with that? You know? And I mean, that's for me, that's not a useful way of getting through conversations or hanging out with people.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and I definitely disagree with people and have, you know, and I don't mind disagreeing, but it's not really that relevant, you know, it's just your taste, you know. I mean, if someone tells me like ranch dressing is the best, that's what they think. And I probably believe them, you know. I mean, it's, you know, that's the best for them. Like ranch dressing means that you fucked up the food to me, you know.
Right.
So it's not the best in my world, but it's just one of those things. Like that's totally valid. That, you know, I would prefer, you know, Coppola's Dracula over The Godfather or whatever. You know, like, is it a better movie? It's the one I want to watch over and over and over again. Like, you know, am I going to go to the fucking mat with like a film scholar on it? No. I mean, you know, I'm going to go shot for shot and explain, you know, no. I like
Yeah.
it more.
But
It
you
works
also, I think,
my
when
kind
you
of thing.
when you write about something like that, you don't try to explain why it is better than The Godfather. You don't try to you don't try to extinguish the other work of art by explaining your interest in this work of art, you know?
Right. I mean, that's again, that's like the measuring of that's like, oh, I win or something like that, you know? That's like there's something like this contest. Like there's an award, you know? I mean, does an Eisner Award actually mean it's a good comic?
More likely it means it's not a very good comic.
And I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble here. I'm just saying, you know, I mean,
We're also funded by the symposium is funded by the Will Eisner Foundation.
right. But I mean, it's not something, yeah, that he necessarily.
Yeah, he's not choosing the awards anymore. Or
Yeah, no. That's what I was gonna say. It's, you know, and these things, it's the relevance. These things are weird. You know, all of these awards are very strange. Like, who gets an award? Turns out you have to apply to be getting an award. So it's like, well, if you didn't know that, which I was a publisher for a long time before I ever knew that you had to actually like, hey, can I please be considered for your award? I've never done it, but when someone finally told me that's how it was done, I was just like, oh, that seems preposterous.
Well, maybe one thing that's interesting to talk about with that is that a story that I tell to people to kind of explain Teenage Dinosaur sometimes, or explain, and like sometimes I'll mention Teenage Dinosaur to people, and people will say, well, how can I get those books? You know, how can I get these Teenage Dinosaur books? And I mentioned that once I used to work at a comic book store, and I had a budget where I kind of had an unlimited budget to order you know, alternative comics, mini comics, comics from small publishers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I wrote to you and I said, hey, Tim, can I get, you know, 5 of every single book you've published? And I don't think you responded to me. Then I ran into you like maybe a year later, and I was like, hey, what happened with that? And you said, oh, you know, I don't like New York. I don't want to send comics to New York. And the comic book store was located in New York. And I think, you know, I mean, that it was almost worth it for that response, you know, just that. But it also, I don't think of, I mean, there's people that kind of keep their project obscure for reasons, you know. There's artists that have a project and they kind of shroud it in obscurity to compensate maybe for that maybe there's not really anything at the center, and the obscurity around it heightens what they're doing. But I think with what you do, you don't heighten it in obscurity for reasons like that. But you also don't I don't know. I think there's an interesting aspect where you don't make it that easy for people that are interested in this stuff to grab it, but you also really are. It's an interesting contradiction to me because you really are interested in people communicating with the work that you work with. So
yeah, and there's a lot of funny things about me that don't make sense that are touched on in that story. The New York part was probably at least half joke. Well,
yeah,
maybe half
half of
joke.
that was to give me a hard time.
40% joke. Yeah, there's a lot of yeah. I don't know. I'm not trying to make it hard to get.
No, that's what I don't think you are.
There are things that I'm good at, and there's things I really suck at, and I kind of just try to be upfront about not being good at those things with people, and I try to diffuse that idea of me being a publisher that way. And maybe there's an element of that grew out of or was subconsciously related to what you were talking about the, like, I'm not good at shipping, so maybe that's why I'm giving you half the books or something like that,
Yeah.
But there is I do prefer, I also there is I don't want to be completely anonymous, but I do sort of like the anonymity of a book and the anonymity that comes with really odd small press books. So yeah, I don't put a lot of trade dress, me kind of stuff in there. For me, it is more just it extended out of part of working in a comic shop and spending my money on comics and being frustrated with not really being able to kind of quote unquote get into comics. And I had some, realization, that I was like, oh, well, I could just, instead of buying, this Justice League comic or whatever, I could not buy this Justice League comic and just read it and then save that money and then publish a book and then slowly, kind of change what the marketplace looked like.
I think that happens to a lot of people, instead of a lot of people that care about this stuff. When you're in a store and adding, you're potentially adding another comic to your pile of comics that you have, thinking about making, working with someone that wouldn't be on those shelves necessarily, and doing something like that, rather than just taking something off the shelves that isn't yours, putting something onto the shelves that also isn't yours. I think that becomes a powerful thought for people. And I want to just segue into that and read something that you wrote for an upcoming issue of the Comics Journal about, I asked people to answer this question. What are maybe some core problems facing, if you're working in comics in any way, what seem like core problems? What are maybe core problems for people reading stuff, artists making stuff, etc.? Just generally, what's dysfunctional right now, and what are maybe some ideas to get around the dysfunction? And I'm going to read a little bit of what you wrote, and maybe you can, you wrote this a few months ago, maybe you have different thoughts about it now, but I was really interested in this. So you wrote, this is an excerpt of it. In the comic shop, I'm seeing people very happy to find lots of variety, despite the low flow at the moment. We are moving plenty of older comics and have restocked old minis. Seriously, how many were printed? 50? 100? Keep it in print. The audience is bigger than that. It's going to be new to so many people. Good comics stay good, and we sure need a handy supply of good comics to restock the shop. Keep all your comics in print. The audience is so much bigger than just our group of friends, just our friends group. In the shops, it's on us to allow the community growth. It costs nothing to take on a consignment item. That handful of shelf inches is better spent giving space to growth. New cartoonists need that space, and it's what brings us the next wave of comics. Let the people who care take the next step. Clear space for those steps, and we can move forward together. No new comics, no new readers. I'm going to keep going just a little bit. Alienate cartoonists from the shop and become nothing but a corporate plug-in. some fraction of the same catalog every other half-assed with the dregs of their childhood collection has on their shelves. We risk shelf space on unsellable comics from commercial publishers. So when someone creates a comic, then prints them and brings it to us to share, let them. It's not a mark of taste. I know you order comics that ain't your taste. These don't cost us anything. 50-50 consignment is easy. Say yes and watch artists send people to you, adding new groups of people who dig art into your world. We don't say no. We're too busy saying yeah. So I thought those were a very, I think you read that statement to people that make comics or are interested in making comics in the small section of comics that we both work in, and it makes a lot of sense. I don't think anybody would agree with it, and I think most people would be very inspired by it, but it is not it would be very naive to say that that's the dominant attitude.
No, and I mean, I am almost writing that oddly to, the people who are running comic shops, which is a small audience of people that would probably actually be looking at that. But then it's also to the cartoonists also, and it's a weird thing. I do have to keep going over this with cartoonists over and over, where I ask them, what they've got, and they just say they don't have anything new, and I ask for the old stuff, and they don't want to reprint it because it's old, But that's just us as cartoonists looking at our stuff and not digging it, which the artist's opinion of their art isn't really very relevant. They made it. That's the communication. That's the thing that's going to outlive them. And, it's going to be confusing to us who finds this or who likes it. I think a lot of us maybe even imagine a specific audience, like, oh, I hope so-and-so reads this book. I hope they dig it. I hope I get to become friends with this cartoonist that I like because they like my stuff too.
Yeah.
I feel like, these are the things like that the artist may be wondering about, or, maybe they're hanging on to some comments that somebody made about their stuff that they came across, or I don't know. But the artist's relationship with the art after it's done is probably the most corrupted and wrong opinion you're ever going to find about that piece of art, because it's no longer what they think they put into it, or it's no longer what it did to them. It's its own thing. It goes on and it communicates with people in a way that artist couldn't have communicated that in any other way. And that's really the only function of art anyways, is to we're kind of abstractly communicating in a way that's just not strict language,
Well, it's an interesting problem specifically for artists who make zines or artists who make mini comics, as opposed to maybe people who are a novelist or someone who's a filmmaker, where the early work or short works, they're gonna be presented on the shelf, at some point in time next to the new stuff. And I think in new comic book stores in general, unless they have a back issue section, they're very new centric. For the corporate comics, they're usually very new centric, like the new Wednesday publications. For the commercial stuff, for the self-published stuff, there's hardly any back stock. There's hardly any knowledge of, and so I think people, it really, it's kind of maybe one of the more depressing aspects of self-published comics, that they really more and more attract a collector mentality, in that, if you're not around at this moment in time, you're going to miss this 50, this edition of 50 Riso printed thing, because
the whole like kind of obsessive compulsive collecting thing that's attached to comics, and that's why a lot of the businesses still function. And the Wednesday comics, that's what pays the rent usually for most comic shops, is those 4 Wednesdays in the month.
Yeah.
It is weird to me. I don't own a comic shop on purpose. Like, I realized that I was not cut out for being the owner. I was better off being like, the flunky or the monk or whatever like that. I don't like run the whole place. because I don't want to have to attach that problem, like I alluded to in that statement about ordering stuff that wasn't your taste. Is like, I had an employer in the past, and I remember him being very frustrated that, he's like, my daughter needs braces. And I'm looking at this stack of X-Men comics on the shelf that I can't sell. And I'm like seeing how much money that is. Like, I paid this percentage cover price, and I can see that there's, over 20 copies of this book, and he can't help but doing that math against this, this bill. So it is weird to me when comic shops do, like, I don't order that kind of crap. I don't like that kind of stuff. It's like, that is bizarre that it's like self-destructive to them, where it's like, it's only a club about my taste in this comic shop.
Yeah.
But it's like, I know it doesn't, because you ordered too many X-Men comics and you don't even fucking like it. Like, it's a very weird thing. And so, yeah, then they just start playing the odds and the numbers, and that there's no love in it, and that's very, very frustrating way to do that stuff. And yeah, somebody brings in a mini comic and they're just kind of like, that's never gonna fucking sell. Holy shit. And, they're already doing this kind of pissant, like, kind of style of math where it's like, each, millimeter of the store costs this much per second, and it's like, fuck, dude, yeah, you're definitely never gonna have fun ever. Even like if you become a billionaire, like, that's just not gonna, that method doesn't work. And there's no reason to be attached to something as flaky as a comic shop. Like, there aren't really corporate comic shops, I mean, that's how bad a business it is.
It's like subsistence farming, that's what I sometimes think with the new Wednesday books are just the crop that's gonna keep you having some food,
And somehow all these corporations like rest on top of this
Yeah.
lattice work, which is very peculiar. And I don't know, maybe that's the way it is everywhere, but I definitely can, when you see it in comics, it's just like, wow, holy shit, you guys are surviving off of this somehow. And, I definitely puts the question mark over my head about a lot of larger publishers necessarily actually being businesses.
Well, one thing you wanted to talk about that you said was important to talk about was, I mean, maybe we're talking about how comic book store owners treat the medium or think about the medium or the predicament that they're in. But you wanted to talk about how publishers treat each other. And that's a pretty wide subject. I can narrow it down a little bit more, but maybe we could, maybe you just have something to say about the subject in general.
Well, I think that it's become clearer and clearer to me that shows and publishers are really significant, and maybe even more significant than any cartoonist, I mean, when we probably have a few we could line up and say that they're more important. But
when you say publisher, do you mean the catalog of the publisher?
Just that they are there and they're putting new comics out, and that they like, like when Koyama stopped, it's not like, we got another one, when a publisher stops or like a show stops happening, like oftentimes there's not a new one popping up in their place. We just sort of lose that extra venue. We lose that extra voice. We lose those things. And publishers can really bring a huge variety of people out. I mean, even publishers that seem very specifically tasted, when you look at the catalog, there's still a huge amount of variety there, even if they have like a house style. So, I mean, a publisher is creating a place for artists, different artists, stuff to come out, if they'll take on new artists. One of the problems is that a lot of publishers fall into that comic shop owner, small business mind, where they're like kind of counting how many copies they have and exactly how much they spent and doing all this math. And that's very stressful. And I think that that's really hard to, quote unquote, succeed in that way in comics.
I wonder though,
you really don't know what people are going to want. And so, I mean, yeah, the way publishers have treated each other a lot of the time is to kind of like fight over talent, And I wound up in some situations like that early on. Like the first book I did, the second book I did, these were books that did fairly well. And that was a result of me sort of recognizing what I liked that I wasn't seeing being published at that moment. But I also recognized that people would like it. I recognized from working in the comic shop for many years that, like, oh, this has, you know, the extra elements that really make, you know, people who don't understand the language they still like it, you know,
Right.
it's still interesting to them. You know, and it's like, you know, they're just kind of clearly, these were things that worked on people. I saw these things work on people. And then, yeah, another publisher and I like had whatever conflict or something like that. And this publisher had conflict with other publishers and, like, you know, trying to pull books away from them before they got published. And what I realized in that was that, like, oh, I have no interest in this part of the relationship, you know, that, like, being in combat or being at odds with another publisher, like, they're not my competition, you know. I mean, just because they're like me doesn't mean that there's not some limited amount of space for publishers in comics. In fact, we could use more probably.
But that thing you're saying,
most of the great comics are out of print, period. If you make a list of all your favorite comics, most of that shit's out of print, straight up. I don't care who you fucking are either. It doesn't matter who you are. Unless you're, you know, straight off of like DC's top 10 graphic novel seller list, your favorite graphic novels are out of print almost invariably. It's insane, you know? I mean, just, it's really, really weird. Even if you have the most pedestrian taste, most of that stuff is not just readily available to get. Like,
but I guess
so many small press comics that are amazing that are just sitting out there, like, just unavailable.
But I wonder if that's because there's something limited about, okay, yes, a publisher ends and there's not someone that's going to put out the comics that they published. But many of those artists, okay, let's take Koyama Press as an example. I would imagine there's going to be, I guess what I wonder is how many of the artists that a publisher, like, we're just unfairly using Koyama as an example, how many of those artists are not going to continue because they don't have a publisher to do that stuff for them, and how many of them are just going to continue because the stakes for being published by Koyama wasn't life-changing for them anyway. They're still going to be artists. I really wonder about that. There's going to, I would imagine that the majority of artists published by a publisher that goes away, they're going to continue because it wasn't they weren't buying real estate with the profits from their royalties.
Sure.
From these
well,
books
let's be a little bit more fair, and let's pick Sparkplug instead, because we know that catalog inside and out. We know who did and did not continue to make comics after Dylan passed, and, you know, that's a very discernible thing. And this way, we're not, you know, I mean, this isn't meant to, like, pick on,
right? Yeah,
Yama. Like, yeah, it's not like
no.
I'm trying to, like, hassle her back to comics, although she should come back. Although she does still pay for people's print runs, which is amazing. But Dylan stuff, like, some of those folks didn't really find publishers otherwise, you know.
Yeah, well, but it's like, let's take some.
It doesn't mean that they stopped, but we did lose some of those folks as a result of that. And, you know, with Vision Quest, you know, I've had people come back and do pages for Vision Quest and tell me later on, they're like, I could quit doing comics. I didn't think I was going to do a comics page again, but, you know, I'm glad I did this page because it's just a one pager, you know, and it's been very nice with Vision Quest for me to be able to have those conversations with at least 3 different people. Straight up came to me and said pretty much those words, which was just, you know, I think that there being somebody there that gives a shit, somebody that's interested, I think that's such a big part of it.
Yeah, it's
because people don't reciprocate in comics very much, you know. like, oh, it's my favorite comic, but then they like write a letter to the artist and they like complain about the one part they didn't like or some shit. It's like, we are like such a spoiled brat culture, you know. People think complaining is taste or intelligence, you know, or that like, oh, I found an imperfection, you know, like, no shit, nothing's perfect. Like, this isn't a skill or a trait. Like, you're not, that doesn't make you smart or interesting. It's not inviting. I remember Tim Root stopped reading and writing to a cartoonist because that cartoonist wrote a letter back to him saying, you know, something or other about Tim's comic, and then saying like, my wife hates your comics, you know, like she thinks you're spelling, and like, you know, kind of like added his wife's dig to the letter. And I think Tim was just like, fuck, I don't ever want to like deal with this ever again. I don't even want to look at your comic again now. Like, it was just, you know, the communication in comics is really, really bad. Maybe it's everywhere that way, but I see it specifically in comics. And so the way people interact with each other is tough, because you make a comic and you don't ever know if anybody gives a shit about it. You know, I mean, most people don't ever actually hear. I mean, even like quote unquote famous cartoonists don't probably hear too much. Probably don't get.
They hear it less. They hear less, I think. I think they hear
because everyone thinks that they get their ass kissed all day, but really,
people don't know how to reach out to them. And I think that's part of like, I agree that someone, a publisher that helps and comes in and gives support, that I do think that that's very important. But I also think this idea of a publisher going away and then people potentially leaving comics, I think that like energy can be put in having some kind of resource for, or some kind of structure where self-publishing is more is more of a choice for everyone, rather than something that some people are very good at. Some people love to print the books, love to get them out there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I do think that there's something, you know, publishers are always some are gonna last, some are fortified enough to last quite some time, but fluctuations in the bookstore market and the direct market, you know, they're always in peril. But artists, I think, you know, you mentioned that example of Sparkplug, and yes, some people stopped making work, but I think the majority of the catalog of artists that Dylan published, I'd say the majority of them still make work. And a lot of them, someone that you both published, Julia Graffer, she has books come out from larger publishers, but she also always self-publishes. And I think she probably, I like her self-published books. I think aesthetically, they look the best. And I think
she makes them in her way.
Yeah.
It has the magic on it, you know? And I mean, granted, you know, you can't Carolina Rainbow fucking that many. A lot of people can't, you know? And I can dig that, but I don't mean to like degrade the idea of self-publishing. I know that that's really significant, and I'm more than happy for us to talk about that. But the function of a publisher, I think, is something that somebody who is like, I love comics, but I don't have I'm not a writer, I'm not an artist. And like, so like we at Floating World, we carry these books.
And you just, for people that don't know, you work at Floating World
Comics, which is like a fringe international style comic shop and publisher. And we carry these books from Hollow Press, and Hollow Press like reprints like Brinkman and other cartoonists that haven't really been kept in print, even though people are asking for those books. And you know, it's really cool for people to be able to interact with these books, because I'm seeing people interact with these books for the first time, even though to me it's old hat. You know, I saw this stuff a long time ago. I have the old versions of it. There's so many people that never got to see it. There's so many people that still want to see it. There's still so many new people to it. And, you know, I had a conversation with another cartoonist where they're like, I don't like the way that, you know, those editions look versus like this other edition. And my point is like, yeah, but it's in print.
Right.
Like, even though you preferred it when it was a soft cover or whatever, you know, or you had some different, you know, kind of paper, it's like, that shit costs tons of money and there's barely any of them out there. Like I can't stock a stack of these in the store. And I don't know what Hollow's situation is. You know, I know that they keep their print runs low, but they keep reprinting stuff also, which has been really awesome because they're keeping some really significant stuff around. And I guess that was my point with, like, you know, to be a publisher is something even more accessible to people. Like if you love comics and you're a comics collector and you want to help change comics and you're like, damn it, why isn't Hicksville in print? I think Hicksville is one of my very favorite comics ever. And it's like, yeah, it's kind of tricky to get a copy of Hicksville out there to people now. And like, you know, generationally, you'll hear certain cartoonists like wax poetic for Hicksville endlessly, you know? And so people get really curious about that kind of stuff. And that's the same thing with like Brinkman or Columbia or any of these guys where it's like, there's important shit there. Like, you know, like fucking, like how many, are there any Amy and Jordan books in print? Like, Jesus wept, that's insane, dude. Like that should be around, you know? I mean, there's Gary Panter books that aren't in print. Like, it seems really silly. Like,
Well, it's
no
also
one can
good.
keep it up. No one can keep an edition of that going. Like,
But I
damn.
wonder, it's like, I do, well, it's also
Not
interesting
that
to me.
crazy. You know, it's not that hard. It's not that expensive.
No, but it's interesting because like when those new Brinkman editions came out, being, you know, a dork about this stuff, I was one of those people, you know, where I was like, yeah, I prefer the old edition. But it's also like if I want to read a copy of like Great Expectations, I'm not like I need to read the first one published, like the original with the original illustrations. It's in print, you know, like most literature is, you know, and it'll usually be you can go into any Barnes and Noble and you can get a Signet Classics edition that has, you know, an ugly photo cover, but you know, you can read the work, and it's less. I mean, it's that problem comics have of that. It's very like fetishistic kind of like liking your first exposure to a thing that kind of predominates a lot of these discussions about this stuff.
And you know, you like the vinyl versus the CD versus the tape or whatever. I mean, it's around though, you know, it's about around to debate. But there's so much, almost all the great comics are not in print. And that's, I guess that was the core of that point. We don't have to spend the entire time.
Well, I'm gonna
say, this course, but
there's something specific I want to get to. I'm gonna invite people to, because we've gone over an hour, so this is usually when people start asking questions. And I know we've just been having a discussion like we normally do in the Q&A and these things. I'm gonna invite people to start putting questions in the chat about anything we've talked about or any questions you have for Tim about anything. But I did kind of maybe talking about like a concrete example of stuff you've done in publishing and that touches on a lot of the things that we've talked about. And it's, you know, maybe relevant just to get your opinion on this in general, but can you maybe just walk us through like maybe a good avenue to explain how you work as a publisher in general? You could talk about the process of finding Matt Fury's work, how you decided to publish that book, and maybe a little bit of what I've heard the story. I think it's a very interesting story. I don't want to force you to tell it, but maybe a little bit of what happened from issue 1 of Boys Club that you published and then issue 2. Because I think it actually really relates to your agreement of printing a print run and giving one person half and keeping the other half, you know? I mean,
you want the Boys Club story?
Yeah, if you want to tell it, or maybe if you don't want to talk about that, maybe just what you think of someone who put that out and the crazy thing that happened with that work. You know, I don't think I've seen quotes from you about it, about what happened, even though you're involved in the process of it.
I would go to Alternative Press Expo in San Francisco every year, even when it was in San Jose. I went to all of them for a very, very, very long time. And 1 year, I came across a table that had sort of a mountain of zines on it. Like they had put the table together as like a mound, you know, you had to sort through, which was appealing to me because everybody else's was, you know, tidy. So I dug through and I pulled out a handful of books and paid the money or whatever, and the person that I was paying said, "Oh, the artist is right here." And Matt Fury turned around. He had a baseball cap on with a really long brim, like really long. And I bought them, and I went home and I read it, and I really dug it. I think I actually pulled out that copy. It's like quite stained now, but I had a good relationship with it. I showed it to other people. They seemed to like it, and I was like, oh, I should do this. And so I talked to Matt, and he dug it, and I brought it to shows. I brought it to San Diego Comic-Con in 2006 or 7. I can't remember. And after that, I guess Alvin Buenaventura got a copy of it at that show, and then struck up a relationship with Matt, and they were both in the Bay Area. So
Alvin and Matt struck up a relationship.
Yeah, in the Bay Area, they became buddies or whatever. And Alvin had sort of a reputation for doing this, sort of like pulling like books that were in deals with other publishers out from underneath them, which in comics is not probably a hard thing to do because there's not much dough or whatever. And I'm saying that that's what he did in this case, but I was going to print on it in the regular print run. I had just done that smaller edition for San Diego.
Right. You were going to print with the edition of #1.
Yeah. And okay, well, I mean, yeah. So I guess, yeah. I mean, Alvin and Dylan are both gone, so I guess, yeah. Dylan had a similar situation with Alvin, where Dylan was going to put a book out, and then Alvin kind of talked the artist into going with him instead. So somehow through the grapevine, I got a call from Dylan, and he said, "Oh man, I think Alvin's going to put out that book." And I was like, "Well, shit, man, I already turned the files into the printer. So, I mean, I never heard anything about it. So, good luck to him, and I was just kind of chuckling, and I was just like, like, it's done. It's at, Brown's got got him. And as I'm talking on the phone, the call waiting is, and then it's Matt Fury. And I was just like, holy shit. And I was like, well, dude, it's Matt on the other line. So I guess, thanks for the heads up. And I don't know how, Dylan got that, that 10-minute storm warning for me, but
makes sense that he did.
Yeah, and I'm sure that the answer probably makes sense too, but I don't know. I never knew the story. And Matt was really bummed out, but kind of like, well, it makes more sense, and doing all this stuff. And he talked about it. And
can I ask?
I left it to Matt. Like, do what you want to do, but like, it's actually at the printer now. So like, tell me absolutely not right now, and I can like call them and stop it. But like, it's not like stop the presses, but
how many were you going to print? How many were you printing
initially?
Yeah. Well, at this moment, how many were they going to print?
I think it was going to be 2,000. It might have been 2,500.
And in your deal would be that Matt would get half of that print run.
Right. Well, my deal is 50-50. So yeah. Yeah. But I mean, the book, when I would share the copy, my own personal copy with people, just all over the place, people who didn't read comics, they'd read the whole thing. They'd like, fall over laughing. It was obvious that it worked, I mean, I'd worked in comic shops and B. Daltons and Super Crowns, and, you can kind of tell when a book just works on people, and that book just works. So I knew I kind of had something going there. So I left it up to Matt though, and Matt was like, oh shit, like, yeah, no, okay, well, fuck it. Like, let's do this one together, and then I'll do my next one with Alvin. And I was like, okay, fine.
#2. He'll do #2 with Alvin.
Right. But, well, he said I'll do the next one with Alvin. And so that's kind of where it hung for me. And emotionally, I was like, dang, man, like, what the fuck? Like, that was, I was, it bummed me out. And then I became petty about it, and I was like, shit, I'm gonna print him, and then like Alvin's gonna reprint it, and then like, and I was like, all right, so I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna print 5,000 copies then. Like, there's no way, like, just to like fucking, so I was like, Alvin's not gonna reprint number one. Like, I really like, this is like a moment of pettiness, and so I did that, and then I sent them to Matt, and that was the end of it. And Alvin
you sent now like 2,500 copies to him.
Right. Yeah. He was like working at an art supply store or something. I sent him to that art supply store, I think. But it was actually that like philosophically changed me, because I was like, I don't want to do this. Like that was not a cool move for me, to like have that sort of like, I'm gonna make it so that you can't do it, kind of attitude. Was really petty, and was like spoiling my enjoyment of comics publishing, because I was really stoked when people would see that book, and I was like, fuck yeah, dude. Like, it's kind of like I had this magical comic that people would just dug, that I could like, oh holy shit, I can just show this to people, and it just goes.
I worked in a store when that came out, and I remember ordering them, and I think we ran out of them like on the first day. I mean, they really did.
That comic is very special in its own way. And lots of bad things happened as a result of that. Matt got ripped off a fucking shit ton right in front of me, even after that. But anyways, I did that petty thing, and then I was like, you know what, dude? Fuck this. Like, I don't want to be in this part of comics anymore. Like, where we like fight over cartoonists and books. Like, there's all these dope cartoonists out there that, aren't getting seen. So that became a big thing for me, which was like, instead of like kind of being like, how can I get a book with, Mark Bell or whoever else is cool that I like, like, how can I weasel that out of the world or something like that, was a thing that like I was definitely getting like invested in those ideas, where it's like, oh, I gotta be cool or something like that, and I was like,
a publisher that
fuck this,
or to be a publisher that people talk about, or be a publisher that's of the moment.
I was looking for some form of community, I think, honestly, and that's what the publishing community of small press art publishing looked like more often than not at that time. And it was unpleasant for me, and thank God I had Dylan there to sort of, debunk and devil's advocate against like all my like isms and mania that I was holding around all of that shit. That was better than any kind of other therapy as a publisher that I probably could have ever gotten. And I did, being around him changed the way I did a lot of that stuff.
Being around Dylan.
Yeah, and I think that changed the way I published though a lot too. And was part of the like, oh, Dylan's thing is that he wants to put out a book and then have that person go and get popular, So it wasn't like the same level of burn for him, for like him to put out a book and then for that person to go to another publisher. Like that's even, was sort of philosophically elemental to his thing. He had a few people that he wanted to continue to publish because he just loved their stuff so much. He had some people he wanted to publish that he never got to, that were like the reasons he started the company. So that stuff's all, that's all, we have our own abstractions with those problems. But for me, that's when I realized like, oh, my efforts are better spent somewhere where someone's being ignored, or someone's been missed.
There's another aspect to that. I mean, there's an end point to that, to the story you're talking about with the publication of that book that I think might explain what brought you to that mindset, or might have explained that mindset to you a little bit more, involving what ended up happening. I mean, you don't have to go into it if you don't want to, but I think it relates to other things you've been talking about with ideas of taste and ideas of like who publishes what, who's in control of presenting a vision of something. So with the copies that Matt had, something that you had published that had the Teenage Dinosaur logo on them, something happened with those copies that to me is fascinating. About it says something that to me, this world of small publishers and comics, it's so small, and it's to me it's always seemed like important that it's low stakes in terms of people putting their stamp all over things, because it is a rare medium where you can express yourself with a very limited amount of means, and you don't have to worry about people putting their mark all over something and turning it into a high stakes business. Seems deeply counterintuitive to me. If you really want to become a rich mover and shaker in the world of culture, there's other forms of culture, film and music, that are probably sync up with your mindset a lot more. People do come into comics to kind of hustle things because it's easy to. There's no bar of entry in comics. Anyone can come in and push their weight around, but they usually tap out because it doesn't sync up with what they want to do. But something happened with those copies that that says something about a weird mindset that does happen with comics publishing that I think relates to other things you've been talking about.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a you're talking about like the Alvin's Buenaventura price sticker kind of thing.
Well, the way you explained it to me was that he bought copies from, or this is how I recall it.
So all the copies of number one that he carried were bought from Matt.
Right. And then he sold those on his website, or he sold those to stores, but he didn't just sell them as Teenage Dinosaur books. He put a Buenaventura sticker over the Teenage Dinosaur logo.
Well, there is no Teenage Dinosaur logo per se on the book like that, except that the last page has the little logo that Matt drew. And so I just put it on that, mathematically.
Right. It
worked out. But people over the years have told me that they didn't even recognize what that was, But yeah, he essentially, that became, the story went around that was Alvin's comic, that he published that.
Right.
Which, whatever. I mean,
it's Matt's comic.
Well, yes, obviously it's Matt's comic, but this is as a publisher, publishers, and I think Alvin was definitely got stung with this, is that he wasn't like writing and drawing comics, and so as this great lover of comics, as this huge fan of comics, like, he is putting himself out there to do that, and however he managed to finance that, trying to have some kind of function of business scruples makes sense. It's not something that I do.
No, that's true. That's true. It's an obvious move to make.
It's it is what it is. I don't know. I mean, how I don't mean to make him out to be completely sinister or something like that.
No, I don't think.
But it is one of those things, though, that is strange, where you're kind of like, But I mean, as a publisher, that wasn't my thing. Was to I published Teenage Dinosaur. I mean, even the name of the company is like indicative of that. I mean, everyone was like, no. It was like I had two names I was gonna pick, and the other one was like kind of like cooler, a cooler name for sure. But it was like such a reference to a punk band that I was kind of like, oh, this is not safe, like in that way for me to do it.
You started it when you were pretty. How can I ask how old you were when you started it?
This is like a math problem, man, but it's 2005 and I was born in 77. So
I don't want to make you reveal your age. But
heavens, no, I don't mind people knowing my age. It's just, whatever age I was then. I was in my late 20s, in the back half of my 20s. So, I mean, it's not, I think that's one of those things that really frustrated me about some of that stuff, there was never any weirdness with Dash, He sold the book for undercover price, and I was just kind of like, I think you can get cover price, but whatever. You know, I mean, that was like probably our conversation about it, like after publishing.
Right.
But I mean, that was it. And the famous art critic on the back that we quoted, I spelled her name incorrectly, which is a very signature move for me, unfortunately, for better or worse, I guess maybe I should say. Those are the only issues with that. So I mean, yeah, it's weird how that stuff turns out, but those ideas, though, I mean, trying to run a business in art seem not fit for me. And so I mean, yeah, when you run into people and they're like, oh, that sounds interesting, how do I get it? And it's kind of like this whatever, you know, brick wall of technology for Tim. It's like not a thing. I recognize that I'm not necessarily helping the artist in that regard. That's like maybe something that I do that like is detrimental to the book.
One thing I wonder about, and I'm still going to encourage people to put questions in the chat. I mean, me and Tim can easily keep talking. What about ideas of, like, you know, I think something that get historicized a lot in discussions of independent comics history or art comics history is this idea of collectives, and people are so interested in Fourth Thunder being a collective, and the issues of Paper Rodeo coming out, and it's not clear who did what, you know, it's some of the pages aren't signed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think a lot of the things that we're lightly maybe disagreeing with or seeing different ways of talking about with publishing versus self-publishing, to me, it could really be solved with you know, collectives of artists coming together to publish things together. And it's not, there's maybe a budget, people pool the budget, they publish all these different books, and they share in the, you know, one thing about what I do with Domino is there's 400 books on the site, and I, you know, to make the whole thing work, I get a little bit of money from each book, right? So it's a lot easier to earn a living from doing that than any individual artist in the store who's just doing a couple of mini comics. It's impossible to earn a living from a couple of mini comics. And so that really, I think there's something that shouldn't be how things are for artists. But if there was some kind of collective work of artists together, I think that could solve a lot of things, or it's at least something worth trying. That I don't see I don't see a lot of discussion about those things.
So I think that another talent that people who love comics have that maybe don't write or draw comics is the ability to communicate with lots of different types of people and to stay on like the good side of them more often than not. That's something that a lot of cartoonists don't necessarily have. And I mean, spending a lot of your time focusing on communicating with a piece of paper to share your message makes sense to me why you don't get, you know, that kind of practice. It kind of isolates you socially. It can really slow our social skills. And I think people even talked about it during quarantine, about how they lost some of their social skills just in quarantine, or at least their social graces possibly. So, you know, if you think about that, that may be the case with a number of us, regardless whether or not you're an artist. But artists are having an abstract emotional communication with their piece of art that they're creating. And then that art goes off and has its own life. So yeah, it's weird when you find that you get a bunch of artists together. There is oftentimes poor communication. So I think that's maybe one of the things that working in the comic shop all these years gave me, was trying my best at least to be cordial or, you know, polite to people, and until they crossed, you know, some kind of line. So I do a free paper with Ian Sundahl. Vision Quest is the paper. Thought I had one here at hand. But that's essentially my function in that is to like, you know, to stand in the middle there And like if all those people had to get together in a room, I think it's been awkward even during release parties, and that's not everybody showing up. And there's people who are even less social. So I don't know that that would be like a great meeting of the minds type of situation. It might be amazing, but I'm not trying to orchestrate that kind of thing. So by having that, by being sort of at the crossroads in the comic shop, I can kind of I can collect this sort of small amount. I can make stone soup, as I say, you know, out of it. And so I mean, I'm not. For me, that was a big win because it's like I got to make a free comic. It's got all these people that I think are great in it. Some of my favorite cartoonists of all time are in that book or in the paper. You know, and there's just a lot of stuff that's going on for it. And it doesn't really, I don't lose money at it. And it's just one of those things where I was like, oh, publishing wise, this is sort of perfect for me because I get to work with more artists I like. I get to help people. I think it's great for comics as like a culture / language where it's like, okay, you know, this person was going to put $40 into printing a mini comic. That's going to be whatever, maybe 100 mini comics or something like that at best, maybe less. You put $40 in the Vision Quest, there's 6,000 copies, you know?
Right.
It really just changes your audience, like right there, you know? I mean, you go from
sort of what I mean.
100 people to 6,000. It's like that little bit of that there shifts. And I mean, that's not something where, I mean, that's just, I picked up some social graces from being in comic shops that long and dealing with so many people that are not great communicators. Comics is a great place for people on the spectrum. It really fits for a lot of them. And so I grew to understand that, and I grew to figure out, you know, you just have to let people's taste be honest. And people come in and ask me about, you know, want me to recommend comics, and I try to wriggle some drops of their personal taste out of them, and some of them won't give, you know. It's that rough for people where, you know, they're so fashion policed or something, you know, that their imagination has just been turned into this worry machine that just kind of erodes their soul instead of gives them a way to communicate or a way to come in contact with this art. So I know I got really up there, sorry.
No, I think that's, well, maybe, so you think maybe because of that, like some kind of collective work with people that are drawn to comics because it, and that would be a whole other thing. Why does comics attract people on the spectrum? I think there's a lot of good aspects of comics. I think that's a good thing in a lot of ways, but so you part of what you're saying seems to be because it attracts people like that them doing things together might be very hard. But I also wonder, I'm going to go to a question rather than.
Well, I guess I'm just saying that, you know, you can, again, like someone's a great artist, someone's a great cartoonist. Like maybe you don't want them to make Top Ramen. Maybe they fuck up Top Ramen, you know? Maybe they just can't do something that you think is really normal. Like, I don't know, like tie a shoe or, you know, ride on the bus or something like that. Like, just because someone's an amazing cartoonist doesn't mean that they're amazing at anything else, you know? I mean,
well, but we have to learn.
You see this with artists all the time, you know? Someone's like, oh, they're so great, you know, they're the best actor, or they're such an amazing writer, but like, you know, dude can't wipe his ass or something like that. You know, he can get the Academy Award, or you can, like, you know, get a Pulitzer Prize or something like that. But, you know,
well, their life will be better if they learn how to do that, you know, if they learn how to.
But right, I'm anyway. Just saying that, like, that would be nice, but I mean, now you're into shoulds. Now you're policing an artist. Like, now you're the pig. Like, fuck you, you know? I mean, stop doing that. Like, is where I'm at personally, where it's like, it's not my job. I'm not their dad. I'm not their mom. You know, they're not a little baby. It's not my job to, like, police this necessarily. Like,
yeah,
I'm gonna let it go. Like, you make an amazing comic, okay, you know, I mean, some people's appreciate their art, or maybe, you know, something about somebody makes it hard for me to appreciate their art. It's not like I'm some kind of, it's not like I accept everything and all,
right,
but that's not my job at Vision Quest, you know. In Vision Quest, it's not our job to say no. We say no if you break a few basic principles, like if it's pornography, we won't do it because that fucks it up for the whole team. You know, you can't like come to the community garden and just grow fucking like, you know, poisonous shit that's gonna fuck everybody's plants up, you know. And I don't like comics sideways. I don't like doing that calendar shit, and so I made like a rule there. So that's me being the pig, you know. You got to have that portrait style page of comics, and it has to be comics. And you can argue, if you can argue it with any kind of conviction, I'll accept almost anything as comics if you have enough conviction and you have a thought behind it or a feeling. But those comics aren't all my jam, you know.
Yeah.
We get comics where it's like Ian and I are both kind of just like, woof, you know, like where does this go? Like what do we do with this? Like, you know, like are people gonna read the fucking pages after this comic? Are people gonna throw this newspaper in the garbage can at this point? You know, I mean, there is an idea of community there that you have to recognize. It's like, right, where does this fit? Whose pages? Who's in community with this, or who will not take offense? Who won't leave the paper, you know, as like a personal stab at them or something like that, that we put them next to this person. It does open up different ideas for us. It lets me just accept that comic as it is. Sometimes comics get bumped to the next issue, and sometimes people take that personally and take that comic away because they think that it was like a no good. But it's like, right, sometimes there isn't a good community for it. It's like, oh, there's a bunch of meathead stuff this time, and this person's over here with like their, you know, their baby fiddle and stuff like that. And it's like, I want that to hang out, but like almost everyone else is over here like ripping their hair out and screaming at like the world's on fire, you know, like they're gonna crush this person's comic. Like, can I put it at the very beginning? Can I put it at the very end? Otherwise it's lost.
Yeah.
And so you'll move it or you'll bounce it or something, but it's not like you're saying, no, you suck. You know, Eileen Chavez did a page, the very first page, and it was all of this beautiful gray, like pencil, and it had maybe washes and stuff. And then some of the lettering was just with like the thinnest pencil, and the shade was so close. And, you know, I contacted them and I was like, hey, I like your comic, but I know how this ink hits this paper. I think your comic's going to kind of almost disappear if we print it like this. And I was saying, you know, like, if you can maybe adjust these things, and if you can't, maybe we can adjust them. But like, I don't want you to have a bad experience with this. And so, I mean, those are the few times I've had to like go to somebody. Like somebody did a Garfield joke that had like him and John doing like an oral sex thing, like in panel. And it was like, hey dude, if you switch these things out, like we don't care. But at the same time, I'm telling you, I can't run your comic because of it. And he's like, I'll just do a new page. And I was like, all right, cool. Thanks for being cool about it. But I mean, those are the only instances, and that stuff changed. That was the sense of community where it's like, we just have a very like kind of basic structure there. I mean, I definitely put an emphasis on hand lettering. I have a little snotty line in there, I think, about, you know, if you can draw, you can do the alphabet kind of thing.
You and Jason,
but it's not like I would say like, oh, is that a font? Like, nope, you're out. It's just kind of like, well, if I got to bounce somebody, I might bounce that font comic, you know?
Yeah.
But that's me being a brat. And that's what you deal with a publisher and an editor, is their fussiness, their taste, you know. All of a sudden they're like, oh, I liked your previous work, your new stuff's no good. Like, that's kind of on the publisher for like asking, you know, someone to produce art for them and then holding an expectation. And I mean, you hear artists or editors and publishers, you know, being shits about that sometimes. And I mean, that really frustrates me also. I mean, it's your name on your fucking comic, you know?
Yeah.
Like, if you want to do that, if you want to go step in shit, like, okay, I asked you to dance, and now you want to dance in shit. And I'm just like, all right, I got to be careful about who I ask to dance next time, you know? I mean, it's again, that's philosophically, again, you know, I feel like I have to like honor my invitation or offer or whatever it is you call it when I like talk to somebody about doing a comic. I want it to be honorable. I want it to be fair. I want them to be happy with me, you know. To go back to Matt Fury, he posted something online once where he's like, does anybody actually get paid in comics? You know, which is a classic cartoonist statement, you know, like we all do this, you know, you like see, I mean, we see famous guys, like even like old school famous guys with that issue, you know, they're like, what the fuck? And I kind of wrote to him on the side. I was like, hey, we're like, did you feel like our deal was bad? And he's like, no, our deal was cool. That was cool. That was a good deal. I did make money off of that, but it was, you know, he's like, and I knew what he was saying. He wanted to be like, I made a comic and then you give me money and then you publish it. Like he gets actually paid for it, like a page rate or something like that, you know, like
Well, he's a
what
unique,
you would hope
he's a
for.
unique case with that, where he has this unique property that's kind of unlike, he has this character that's kind of unlike any other character, and how to get compensated for that character is probably something
Well,
that
he just got robbed, man.
yeah.
I
Let's
returned
Tim,
those. I returned the originals to him, and he was at an art show. He was at an art show, and I returned the originals to Boys Club to him at the art show. I was like, "Here you go." Gave him the pages. I drove him down to the Bay Area from Portland. Gave him the pages. I went across the street and got a burrito. Jesse Recklaw comes in 10 minutes later, sits next to me after ordering his burrito, and he says, "That's terrible. What happened to Matt?" And I go, "What?" And he's like, "Someone just stole his art." And I was like,
oh,
"What the fuck?" I get up, I go across the street. I had left. Matt got up and went and thumbtacked Boys Club pages on the wall of the art gallery. Went and sat down. Some dildo walks by and just fucking like chunk, 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 rips them off there like they were photocopies or something like that. Probably stuffed them in their coat or threw them in the garbage. Who fucking knows?
let's
you
see
know?
where let's check and
They
see if
just
Jesse
like
has
yanked it. You know, at least I think it was maybe 4 pages. That was just like I feel like that's like I feel like the world has just abused him like
Yeah.
for creating this hilarious comic, and I do feel really bad about all of the abuse that I mean that wasn't even worse was to come after that, you know? Like Jesus wept. He makes this silly, posy kind of like little boys kind of like humor thing, and man, whew.
Yeah, I could have never predicted. I'm gonna read one of the questions, Tim. This is from
Yes,
Floyd.
go for it. I'm sorry. And I see they
Oh
pop up
no,
and then I don't see them anymore. So
no. This is from Floyd Tangman, and Floyd says, Tim, how can the role of social media in publishing / distribution be countered, subverted?
so subverting social media with publishing?
How can it, with publishing and distribution, the
Is
role
that
that social
hearing?
media plays,
Oh,
how
sorry,
can
I've
it
got
be?
some glitch here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, you froze there for a second. I wasn't sure.
How can the role of social media in publishing / distribution be countered / subverted?
How can the role of publishing?
Role of social media.
Man, is there a way for me to read this?
Here,
There's a layer in this. Is this the chat thing? If I click on chat,
I'll write this directly to you. Let's see.
No. I see him. Okay. How can the role of social media in publishing? I'm probably not a very good social media philosopher. Am I taking that as, do you think that this, like, the frame of this question is like sort of getting around the social media blockade here?
I know that this is from someone who's really is not a fan of social media. I don't want to pigeonhole their viewpoint, but I think I think maybe from the idea of how much social media dominates promotion and connecting with an audience. You know, I mean, some people use it as the only way to get word out about a book.
Right. And I see that that happens a lot with, I've been noticing that with the comics conventions and stuff. Because they're not even doing posters. They're not even getting posters at the comic shop anymore. And it's like, man, posters and handbills. It's like, we're doing a print media show here, guys. Like, you look at something on the internet, you forget it pretty quick. You're scrolling on Instagram, like you see an ad for something, you see 5 posts after that. You've probably, even if it's like subconsciously weaseled in some kind of creepy way, which I'm sure they're doing, that not being relevant, it's not like you're like, oh, I automatically remember when that event is or something, you know? I don't make great memories looking at social media in general, unless somebody has like some real shitty thing to say that's like hurtful that I have to stop and like think about and kind of mull over, you know, kind of thing.
Arguments.
And I think that that's maybe one of the things about publishing and distribution that does work contrary to that is we're looking at like, just like we're looking at a light right now. You guys aren't looking at me. You're looking at a light. You're not even looking at a picture of me, which would be light reflecting off a picture to your eye. Like, we're looking at the source of light. We're looking directly at the light, and it's fluctuating. It's like fucking with our brains and our eyes, and that's fine. I like movies and stuff. I love movies. I'm not hating on the device too much, but we have to kind of recognize that this is maybe not the best way for us to create strong memories.
Yeah.
Our memories, at least my memory, seems to work better off of dealing with reading something physical. And I don't know, maybe that's just a generational thing, but comics stay, you know? Comics go into a weird place. You find comics in weird places. People pull weird things out, you know? Lost comics are still being found, you know? Lost films are still being found. And I'm not saying that there isn't like some kind of, you know, digital version of that too, but I think just by making the physical act of making those comics and those books is really going to change a lot of that.
I think that's probably the only way,
even though it's fragile. Right. You can't really, I mean, unless they catch it right at the beginning, they can't even like take all the copies out of circulation of a book, you know? I mean, it gets rare, it gets hard to find, it gets esoteric or whatever, but it's not necessarily gone. It's much harder to kind of, you know, like books have that termite kind of art quality where they creep in, the comics can slide between things, you know, someone knocks out the fucking wall in their house and some fucking, you know, Carl Barks comic falls out. It's like, that's dope, you know? I mean, is there a cell phone going to come tumbling out and then someone's going to be like, screen, it says Carl Barks. I should go look into Carl Barks. Like, maybe it'll happen, but I doubt it.
You won't see all of someone's posts. You won't see all of someone's
posts. But if you expect though the internet to like really represent for you, like you have to play the fucking internet. And I know people who know how to do that. And they like spit it out at me, you know, but like I can't record all of the things that they say. And then when I go to try to do something on the internet, I don't have that form of literacy that I do otherwise. So I think just by making those books, but yeah, trying to get the word out online about publishing and distribution, that is weird if you're like fighting an algorithm or, you know, somebody was lamenting like, nobody really hangs out on websites anymore. It doesn't seem like, you know, and I don't really know how you check into that idea, but I think the internet's a good way for you to reach out and I kind of actually try to contact somebody that you couldn't find otherwise. I mean, the Yellow Pages was really significant to me at one point, you know, and you like hear about old zinesters like Fact Sheet 5 and all this stuff. And, you know, the internet is allegedly going to connect all of this stuff and put us all together, but I'm not seeing, it's not fulfilling that fantasy in a clear way to me. You know, I'm not seeing this kind of great open shopping center of comics that I can go to online that's, you know, easy and clear to look at. Like, it's always just, you know, there's still somebody in Cleveland that's like a local mini comics star that like we don't fucking know about.
Yeah.
There's still somebody in, you know, Las Vegas that's like probably the local mini comics fucking guru badass, like that they all the other small pressers are like, oh man, oh I love whatever, ding dong, you know. And it's like every city has probably its regional kind of superstar, and sometimes those people actually get big and like go out and become a known cartoonist who has like multiple books on a credible publisher, which I know is like the real big fantasy, I think, for a lot of cartoonists in our end of the spectrum. But you know, that stuff is still true, and it kind of blows my mind. It's like I want to know like who are those people in that place, you know? Like I want to have more connection to that idea, but digging around finding mini comics online is very awkward for me.
Yeah, very. Yeah, that's
And
happens
you
very
know,
rarely.
I have
Here, I'm gonna ask Jess. I think Jesse has it. Jesse, do you want to read this question out loud? And thank you for that question, Floyd. Okay, Jesse says
heavy question a lot. I could probably talk about that for years.
Yeah. What is Mad Magazine syndrome?
Mad Magazine syndrome is a term that I use to describe essentially what happens to most of us kind of growing up in so much pop culture, you know, the rappers and everything, Twinkie the Kid and all of this like stuff. Like we just have cartoons and pop culture all over everything. And they're making references to things. And I would read Mad Magazine and it would be making fun of movies that I'd never seen, you know, all the time. Like I could get Mad Magazine, but I never seen The Towering Inferno or whatever it was, you know. I mean, I'd never see these movies. But I'd know all the jokes about them. I'd know the parody inside and out because somebody I like, you know, or, you know, Jack Davis drew it. So I really like drooled on it for a long time, something like that. And I would, you know, someone would even talk about the movie. And I'd kind of be able to kind of like move along with them in the conversation because I had already read this parody of them. And then I'd see the movie, you know, and it'd be like, you know, Poseidon Adventure or some jazz. And it's like, stuff's funny to me because I'm remembering, you know, like I'm remembering the Mad Magazine of it. And that's that thing where it's like, we're living in so much reference. We're living in so much like steeped imagery. We're just swimming through pop culture, you know, I mean, this was like seen as a big deal. Like this was like a big thing that like when Tarantino came out or something, people were like, he's just talking about movies and stuff and comics and toys or whatever. I know he wasn't talking about toys so much, but the point just being that like, you know, how much that became part of the vernacular after that, you know, it's just like now everyone's just kind of talking about all this kind of, you know, all of their pop culture tastes. And you know, maybe that's the interesting thing about the internet is we see that everybody's got their taste and they've got their own little spot, you know, and it's like, maybe that is cool for you to be able to find somebody else that likes that thing on the internet when you couldn't before. But the Mad Magazine syndrome is just definitely the result of like having already absorbed what that is without actually having absorbed what that is and already having somebody else's opinion on it. It's like, you know, I mean, like I'm laughing at like a, you know, like a scene where someone's drowning, you know, because it's like, I remember that Mad Magazine and it's like, that's a really weird, that's just a weird thing where we're aware of stuff that we don't know anything about. You know, people talk about the Bible and they've never read the Bible. I'm one of them, you know, like it's quite ignorant and arrogant, you know. And I mean, you know, I think people talk about like Uncle Tom's Cabin and stuff like that, you know, and it's just like, but I don't think most of them have read it, you know. These are just the weird things that we do is like we just kind of start dragging that stuff around. So the Mad Magazine syndrome is just that it's just, yeah, it's got all this like weird tendrils to it, but just absorbing like parody and satire and other people's opinions. Like this goes back to what you were asking about some of the Tonfa stuff, where, you know, I thought Siskel and Ebert was such an interesting show when I was a kid, because these guys are like arguing about movies and they're showing the previews. And I was like, wow, like that's a show, like movie previews, which I love to see. And then these guys are like fucking fighting about this stuff, you know?
Well, they're talking about culture.
And
They're talking about,
Roger
it's a weird
Ebert
show.
became like a thing to me. But Roger Ebert's taste became such a thing for me, where it's like, I was like, oh, he likes this movie for this reason, and I don't care for that reason. So even though he's giving it the thumbs up, it doesn't mean anything when it comes to like this kind of comedy, because he's a pushover for that or something, you know? And, you know, that was a big deal. And then like, but then I got really into like that, like, not really, but I think when I look back on it, Men on Film and Elvira were big deals for me, because these were like other personas that would talk about art, movies mostly, in other ways that were really much more personal, you know? Like Elvira is just kind of like about stuff, you know, but she's like also kind of there to like make her jokes and stuff. And Men on Film had like such a caricaturish sort of perspective given, that it was really great to see, you know, like, I don't want to speak to like the sexuality of the artists that made Men on Film, but you know, it's my perception is that they were like hetero dudes pretending to be gay. But
Are you talking
also,
about the living color sketch?
yeah, in Living Color, yeah, it was a TV show. There was a reoccurring bit with David Alan Grier and
Was it Damon Wayans?
yes, thank you. Was it Damon? God damn it. Anyways, trivia aside, please forgive me when you correct me.
I remember it too. I haven't thought about it in a long time.
You being the internet, despite my internet stress flub right now, you know, they would look at those movies from a very specific perspective to make, you know, to land like how they would, whether or not they liked a movie, you know, if they give it the snaps up or the hated it. Those things were really significant to me, because when I saw that, I was like, oh, like how you see the movie is like, you know, it's your show, it's your thing. And even though I don't sign the Tonfas or, you know, anything like that, I do prefer the anonymity of it. That those things to me were like the kind of those were the feet in the door for me emotionally or philosophically, to just kind of, hey, this is how I feel. This is what I thought, you know. I thought this movie was like half The Mask, half The Crow. Like, what a giant waste of the cast, you know. Blah. The movie, you know, the comic is so dope, you know. Like, this is not typically what a movie review would be, but this is kind of just how I shoot the shit at the comic shop with people also. Which is a big, probably another part of it. Again, the socialization of Tim Goodyear is like the comic book store, you know.
Well, it's
So
talking
it's
about
to pick those skills up, but yeah.
well, those shows are all
Mad Magazine. That was supposed to be about Mad Magazine, huh?
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
I miss Mad Magazine with all my heart. I cannot believe that DC stopped producing truly new material for it. It blows my mind. I also we lost Bill Morrison. His powers in comics were, I think, epic. He made Simpsons and SpongeBob comics phenomenal. And then he left them to make Mad Magazine, and those comics quickly fell apart. And Mad Magazine let him go after like an issue or two. And I don't know what happened to him, but I don't see his powers in comics anymore. And he made contemporary kids comics great. Like, actually, you know, he actually made those comics. He kept them great. And without them, they immediately fucking disappeared. So Mad Magazine, come back with Bill Morrison, please, right away.
Well, I think
Or maybe so I can hire Bill Morrison right away.
I think an appreciation of Bill Morrison and Mad Magazine might be a nice. I mean, we are at the 2-hour mark, and that's a nice. I think talking about a specific artist and a specific publication and professing some love for it might be a good way to end the conversation. We can wait a second to see if other people have something to say. But I love talking about this stuff with you, Tim. And it's like I have these notes next to me about things you've said that I could. There's plenty to follow up on that I'd like to ask you more about. But I know that you'll express other ideas about this stuff with everything that you do in your work and the work that you publish. I was wondering if maybe you could talk to us about maybe what the latest, just as a way to end things, what the latest Teenage Dinosaur book is, and maybe let us know about it, or maybe let people know how to find out more about Teenage Dinosaur if they are interested.
Yeah, Teenage Dinosaur is a tricky thing in those regards. As far as publications go, I quasi-published Bobby Madness's new thing a while ago and have since sort of struggled with getting it into a format that seemed appropriate.
I have this one that you, okay.
Madness comic, is that what you're holding?
I have this one that you just sent me.
We're holding different issues of the same title. This is maybe a more appropriate size for the internet. It's the Bobby Madness. I did a new thing with him, but I need to correctly put that together. I also published this with Rick Grimes, which turned out to be his final published piece while he was alive, although maybe I'm mistaken. Perhaps something in Rabbit Fiends came out between Polynobs Part 2, which is what we have here. He was, I believe, in some of those issues of Rabbit Fiends that have come out recently from Rick Veitch.
Oh, wow.
Those are available like print on demand, I believe.
From Amazon.
Right. Yeah. Which is maybe a cool thing that they do, actually. So that may be one of the newer things. I did make some new stuff for Short Run, but it may have just been mini comics, or not mini comics, but like I did a new issue of Video Tonfa. Which is related to my new project, which is movies that are by cartoonists or from comics or about comics in some way. So I'm going to do a series of those. I have a bunch of other stuff that I need to sort of square away how I'm going to publish it. But yeah, I think that Rick Grimes piece is significant. It's a silk-screened book. I produced that with the help of Daria Tesler. I kind of kept doing these little things with Rick Grimes, the cartoonist, not to be confused with the character who I believe is named after him, to try to kind of constantly get him to finally put out his comic, because he wanted to have his own comic, Goozle Comics, which we had agreed to do. He didn't want to do the original version of it. He wanted to do different material. He had some material he wanted in there, had some material he was always working on. He would finish that material and then say he didn't want it in there. So unfortunately, we never really pulled that off, but I would get his sort of, I don't know if it was like sketchbook greatest hits or like just kind of one-off funny kind of single panel things that he dug. But those are sort of my ways of encouraging him to do that stuff. He's one of those people that disappeared from comics And that guy has some incredibly talented and famous friends to encourage him or whatever it is over the years. I'm not sure. He was from that very first class of the Kubrick school back in the 70s.
I guess one thing that I think about with what you're saying now is maybe I feel like I've been pushing this line where I'm like, well, people need to be, I haven't said it exactly this way, but I've been maybe more or less saying this thing like people need to be more self-motivated. They need to take care of themselves a little bit more. They need to figure out a way to they shouldn't be worrying about a publisher doing things for them. They should figure out their own plan of attack. And I think you're very sensitive to people maybe not need, maybe needing is the wrong word, but the role that someone else, the essential role that someone else can have in drawing out someone's work. I mean, that's how you're describing this comic.
I shouldn't probably like make a comparison to like Cyrano de Bergerac because of speaking of things that I haven't fucking read. But I have watched previews to movies and I've watched parts of the movies and I've definitely seen the Looney Tunes. Speaking of Mad Magazine syndrome, you know, but it's like some, you know, like in that experience, like one person has like is the dope artist and the other dude like can spit it, you know, or whatever it is, right?
So you're Cyrano in this?
I don't know who I am in this. I'm me talking about what's probably actually like a Bugs Bunny cartoon. Nonetheless, though, it's like, you know, we need that relationship, you know, and I mean sometimes, yeah, like what does it do? Like what does it do? How can you serve that person, you know, to help that person move along? Because like I was saying, you know, you're like buff in one way, but then you're weak in another way, you know? And you know, maybe I can like be really righteous about your comic, you know? I would talk about your comic in a way that I would never talk about my comic or my art or whatever, ever.
Yeah.
And that helps in a lot of ways, you know, for me to be able to project it a little bit away from me, to be able to share how much like I bask in, you know, how much I love that thing, you know, whatever it is. So, you know, that balance is that, yeah, like maybe like you and I have like we're able to be more like punk or honorable about it than somebody else would be, you know, to be like more like, I'm just gonna like stomp through the fucking broken glass to like fucking deliver this postcard, you know, because like I said I would, and I'm not gonna fucking like fail like on that front, you know, I'm not gonna like my word is my bond or something, you know? And it's like other people are like, you're a fucking moron. You just like cut yourself to ribbons to like deliver a postcard that the stamp fell off of or something like that, you know? But it's like somebody who can sit around and make, you know, Goozle comics or can, you know, create 3 different versions of Goozle comics without ever letting them go out in the world, you know, maybe needs somebody else that's gonna go and fucking, you know, go and eat shit in some other way, you know, to like facilitate that, you know, where it's like, you know, he wrote the poem, but like he needs the other dude to spit it for him or something like that. Maybe that's a really bad metaphor. But you know, it's like it's when I figured out kind of why chess was an interesting game, where it was like, oh, each piece has like its strength. It can like do its weird move, right? Like that one dude can move like a 7. But then like also like that's what fucks him up, right? So it's like you need the other dudes that can do the other moves around him, you know, like that one's only diagonal, like that one only goes across, like, oh, like if these ones work together, they can be totally badass. But if each one is like just running around on its own, it's probably just gonna get nailed, you know? And so like each person has their own special abilities, you know. Some guys can do that, like rook move, or, you know, someone else can like is like the king or whatever like that, with like they can go in any direction except that they're just hella slow, you know. And you're like, damn, wish that guy was half as fast as the queen, you know. We'd be all fucking sitting pretty then. And it's like, yeah, you would, but that's like not how it is, you know. Like
Yeah.
King Kong is just gonna like be asleep like half the game or whatever, you know. And you're just kind of like, I'm gonna send out this guy that can only go walk sideways, you know. Like, what a weirdo, you know. It's like, yeah, that's the guy that can like save your ass half the time, you know. This is how it is with all of this stuff, you know. When Ian and I put Vision Quest together, it's certain ones sit next to each other just like that, you know. It's like this comic and that comic, perfect. That's almost bad news though, you know. Like, whoa, 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 like they're gonna like throw out the balance of that, you know. Like, it needs to work across the board, and you kind of have to try to look at the relationship for that comic holistically, you know. So I mean, as the publisher or editor or whatever, you know, if you're going to help somebody facilitate their comic, or what if you're the inker or, you know, a colorist, like there's a job in comics where like they definitely ruin the product more often than not. I mean, that's like somebody stamping all over the stuff. Like, I know people like to complain about, you know, somebody like Yo or somebody like that, you know, but like, you know, he's putting it out there, you know. It's like he's making like the mixtape for all of us, you know. It's like he's making like the Nuggets record, even if it's like, you know, got his face on the cover. It's like, thank you for giving me all this briefer, you know. I wouldn't have had that shit otherwise, or whatever the fuck it is, you know. I mean, there's all these weird variables where it's like not perfect, you know, like,
Right.
but we can, you know, we can definitely make it balance with each other if we, you know, sometimes you can see that. So, you know, that's something that I try to facilitate as a publisher, because I don't know. I mean, as an artist, I definitely have like a million hangups. And if it's all by myself, I probably won't finish hardly anything, you know? I kind of need somebody else there for me to finish it. Because
Yeah.
like if I fail myself, whatever, like I let myself off the hook pretty quick probably, or I don't mind beating myself up for the rest of my life about it, apparently. But if I do it to somebody else, which happens by accident all the time anyways, but I mean, yeah, if I knowingly do it to somebody else, like I can't stomach that, you know. So I have to pay for me, and like, you know, instead of buying Justice League of America, for me to like buy, you know, 2,000 copies of Goddess Head, or, you know, whatever it is, you know. Those are, I think, better moves for me.
Yeah. Well, I think
I don't
that's.
know everybody else.
Wait, can you say that last part?
So I don't know if it really is for everybody else. I mean, definitely there's ways for you to serve the things that you love, though, in the world, you know. I mean, the things that you love could use help,
Well, but I think you're also.
regardless of what it is, you know. I mean,
You have a sensitivity to these things that grows out of a sensitivity that you would like to have bestowed on your work. And I think that that's a real project. That's a real artistic statement, working with other people's work in a way that you imagine, in a way that would be beneficial to your own work, or to the way that you do things. And then actually doing it comes out differently than how you imagine it in your head, because every artist is different than you. But that's where your project as a publisher is more like an art project than, I mean, every publisher thinks of their publishing as an art project, but yours comes closer to an actual expression of art than I think many others, because of that sensitivity to each project and modulating things, not having like, this is how we do things here. You have this approach that's you have a real sensitivity to people's art, which you would assume would be like the bare minimum in publishing and working with cultural things, but it's the reverse. It's very rare.
people talk about like, and it's hard for me not to make a million references here, but like the way it should be,
Yeah.
and should and all this. And it made me, for me, it's like, well, I'm just gonna run it that way, I mean, so like, if someone was gonna publish with me, I'd want them to like, for what I say to be important, where I'm like, fuck that paper. No, not that paper. They're like, okay, we will definitely not use that fucking paper. We may not get exactly the paper that they do want, but like we'll ache towards it, we'll reach towards it. I mean, you gotta, I just want it to seem like it doesn't seem like a crazy feat, to ask people to give a shit about the relationship that they have with each other. Which I know, again, is a big problem for everyone everywhere all the time. But in art, it's very weird. And when somebody is like a quote unquote business person, in publishing, what the fuck is that? I mean, maybe it used to be different, but I mean, it used to be that comics were there to like hold the ads together, essentially.
Yeah.
Like it was a very weird thing. Like, does that make them like good or bad? No. Like, are those the best comics of all time? Maybe not. Is that where like a lot of comics language was developed for the first time? Sure. Like, I mean, do you like Ziggy? Like, does it matter if you like Ziggy? Does it matter if you like Captain Easy? Like, people don't even consider newspaper comics sometimes. People don't consider, Gain Wilson comics or some shit like that. It's very weird. I know I ran away from the point again.
No,
sorry.
that was great.
I don't know. It's what was it I was talking?
I was like talking about sensitivity towards people that you publish.
Oh, I mean, yeah, again, yeah. It's just, yeah, that's someone's fucking art, and whether or not it's your taste is really, who cares, I mean, like we were saying about awards, like that doesn't mean I like the comic, or someone tells me that's the worst something ever, sometimes that will definitely get me to watch a movie or read a comic. It's like, that is the worst fucking whatever I ever saw or read, it's like, oh, I better check that out. Like, anything that, disrupts something that much is gonna make me curious anyways. It's I don't know, all that taste stuff is so funny, I mean, it's really deciding what's going to be popular is definitely not something that works. I mean, you can like put everyone in a barrel and just fucking force feed them something, but that's not been very good for comics, at least in the US. I haven't seen that be like a big growth spot. Comics shrank a lot.
Yeah,
I think ads went away, and I mean, yeah, that comics are just there to make fucking ads work is why comics were a big deal is like a pretty insulting idea. But I mean, I don't know.
They survived it though.
A lot more capacity. Well, I mean, that's definitely how those guys survived, But I mean, again, just because like 5, 10, 20 people managed to like survive in a business one way, like that's nothing. I mean, world population tells you that's
no. I mean the medium. I mean the medium survived.
Was that?
I mean the medium survived. The medium survived that.
Right. I mean, people love writing onto drawings. I mean, it's just not gonna. I mean, whenever there's a picture, someone's gonna write on it eventually. That stuff is just gonna happen. Like, comics is just kind of too much how we do it. Like, we're really gonna have to like change communications beyond the internet for comics to really lose its value there. But I do recognize that, at least one of those questions seemed like they were sort of keeping like some kind of business afloat, and yeah, I don't know if I would be like a good example to talk about any of those types of things about keeping a business afloat. But
Well,
I
that's not
kind
true
of,
because, well,
for me, it's more of a religious thing, you know. Like I don't serve like some indoctrination of a belief system, but I have all my own weird beliefs. But you know, I mean, if I had to tell somebody like, oh, well, you know, I do this with my life because, you know, The Flash is just the best comic ever. Like, I would feel like that was insane. You know, I couldn't like stand up for like one comic or something, you know, even if it was just a specific one comic, you know, like, I don't know, Amy and Jordan or something like that, right? I was just like, since I already mentioned that one being drastically out of print. um, just in general though, like those it's too much.
I think I know what you're saying. It's all, not just that one comic, all of them. Like,
Right. I have to, it's just that, yeah, it's that, yeah, it's comics in general that
yeah,
that makes it nice for me to be able to kind of like jump around and like not have to have like that doesn't fit in with the rest of my line, or that's not the house style or something. Like, it's not a business. Not in his garage. Is that like a business? I mean, maybe he'll take it down to the track and like race somebody and get a little trophy or a little cash bag. But I mean, if you like, how many hours did you work on that? How much did the pieces cost? How much did you normally get paid to do the job? How much would a mechanic normally get paid to do what you did? And it's like, yeah, that guy lost a lot of money, right? That's definitely not why that person's doing that, you know? I mean, why anybody pursues their project is, you know, it's what they're interested in. Like, I feel like the word hobby has like some sort of bad kind of, I don't know, some bad, you know, business around it for people. And I don't feel like it's a hobby just because of maybe just the way that people blow a hobby off, you know, like the word amateur is supposed to be a bad thing, like as if being a professional means that you're the best, or that being like the awarded professional, you know, means you're the best, you know. You know, a lot of people would not agree that Dances with Wolves was better than Goodfellas, but like, whatever, you know, who fucking gives a shit, right? Most people don't talk about Dances with Wolves anymore. Like, none of these things, you know, what was the fucking special of the day 20 years ago? Like, I don't know, maybe I would like to see like the print ad, but like, I know I can't eat that fucking thing. It's gone, you know? That guy doesn't make the chili anymore. He died 15 years ago. I mean, too much chili, but whatever it is, all of that stuff is just is cockamamie. Like, I think the chances of you liking a superhero comic are probably pretty slim. Whoever you are, you know, I mean, they're all kind of like within the exact same frame, you know, like they have to do something the same every time for them to be a superhero comic. But comics are huge and people just cannot like wrap their head around those ideas. So I think that's why it's so important to just kind of continue to like not, you know, not consider your taste valid. I mean, it's fine for you. That's what you want. Go get what you want. It doesn't fucking mean anything though. Like, am I a bad person because I think Starship Troopers is great? Like, am I stupid? Will people think I don't have any fucking, you know, whatever? Will I never have sex again? You know, I sure would love to have someone like, you know, whatever, give me a head scratch. I better like never fucking tell someone that Verhoeven is one of the best filmmakers ever. Like, these are just, you know, people worry about that stuff, the fashion police and all that shit. Like, it's not what art does. It's not art's thing. I mean, if you just want it to be a fashion show or you have OCD, like, go ahead. I mean, we could definitely use some extra comics buyers these days. But you know, it's fuck, you know? I mean, sometimes people will be like, oh, they just put that book out because that's their homie. That doesn't fucking matter. That book's gonna be important to somebody, you know? I sure as shit wouldn't have put that Video Tompa book out myself. That big old fucking 608 page or whatever. That was not ever going to be something I did. Ever. Never, ever. Jason wanted to do it. all right, dude. I mean, he's a sincere dude. Like, didn't feel like it was a bullshit move or anything like that, It was fine. So that was cool. But I mean, I wouldn't have done that, I do
Yeah.
this. Staple two pieces of paper together. And then, maybe sometimes it's three pieces of paper.
I think the difference between this
I mean,
book and
that's just a different thing. Like I needed that person, I guess, to do that. Yes. I needed Jason to do that for that to happen. And I mean, and people have what? Sorry.
Oh, no. I was just saying that what you just said, that the difference between that book and that's the illustration of the collaboration thing you're talking about, or needing someone to do something that you can't do yourself.
Right. And you can find that book in a way that you're not gonna be able to find this. You can't just be like, new issue of Video Tonfa. Like,
yeah,
that ain't gonna something where I'm like, here you go, you can buy it. It's like, where is it? It's like, it's in the trunk of my car underneath the box of water or something like that. I mean, I still find them and I'm like, ooh, cool, I'll take one of those and send it to somebody. But Jason also made it accessible to people, So, I make it this way and he made it that way. But I've had people tell me that book, was important for them in a different way, and I was like, well, that's weird that worked for them that way. And that's their autobiographical thing though, and like, do I want to see what book it's next to on the bookshelf? I mean, I'm kind of curious just to wonder who the neighbor is. But I mean, is it a book that I'll hate? I mean, maybe it is maybe everything else on their bookshelf would be like a major insult to me to be like, oh no, fuck, don't put me next to whatever, I don't know. I can't pick something, but like Leonard Maltin or somebody, like, that's not that bad a book. But it's just, I mean, those are weird things. Like, somebody gets to have their own fucking weird bookshelf, I mean, do they have to hide it under their bed or something like that, Does it upset their wife, are they going to write me a letter that's going to piss me off like they did to one of my best friends? I mean, I know I talked about that earlier. That sticks out to me though, where it's just like, you don't need to share the bad news about the art, like, I feel like that's become criticism, or that's been like ways for people to be clever or smart or dominant, to be like, I found a mistake. I found out that it's not perfect. Why does somebody like this movie? It's so shitty, to bring up Dracula again, Daria told me that she came across somebody and like they were dissing on Dracula, and she was expecting them to diss on like Keanu or Winona, who kind of are the people who get picked on most often in that movie. And they were like dissing on Gary Oldman. And it's just sort of like, whoa, that's just baffling to me, that you would dislike that movie because of Gary Oldman. Like, such a strange world, I would have never fathomed such a thing, but it's like, there it is. Like, I have no fucking, doesn't affect me at all. Doesn't change anything. I'm gonna watch it twice on Christmas Eve while I'm fucking wrapping shit, I mean, it doesn't even matter.
Wait, there's a question from Sirloin Cassio, and he says, do you want to read this, Sirloin, or do you want me to read it? I'm just going to read it. Can you quickly speak to why it's so shocking that Amy and Jordan are out of print? Thank you, Tim.
So Mark Bayer is like a really amazing cartoonist, a really significant cartoonist. Agony seems to be in print, I think, right now. I don't know if maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know if any of his other stuff is in print. And so if I wanted to recommend that, sorry?
Yeah, Agony, I mean, Agony came out, they reissued it a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago, but the rest of the stuff is out of print as far as I know. Right.
Sort of around. So, I mean, but these are big deal comics, I mean, even if you don't like those comics, he's still a really significant cartoonist, I mean, this is like Ben Catcher put this fucking whole thing together, right? Like he's got books that are out of print. This is like baffling to me, you know? I mean, I remember like when I read his stuff the first time, it was because somebody was like offended by the name of his book, you know? And I was just like, whoa, well, I definitely have to check this out now. Like someone had a fucking really weird reaction to this book on the shelf. Like, I'm gonna read this book. And yeah, that was fucking awesome for me. It's like seeing those things that are like upsetting to people where it's like, I saw a Terrence Malick movie when he came back, you know, in the more recent years in the theater. And I think it had like, you know, some beautiful like Brad Pitt or somebody like that in it, you know, and the people in the theater, some of them were just hating it and groaning it. Someone was like yelling at the fucking movie and everyone's like, get the fuck out, you know? And I was just like, this is so interesting though, that like this movie is like, this person showed up to watch a Brad Pitt movie, you know, and they're just like having a shit fit watching this fucking movie. And it's just like, man, like art is so interesting, like how it can fuck with you. But I think yeah, Bayer's like this really significant cartoonist, and just that, I mean, there's even there's what is it that that Greg Araki guy made a movie that's like based off of a Amy and Jordan comic in the 90s, like one of his semi-famous ones. I can't remember which one it is right now. You know who I'm talking about?
I didn't know that he did that.
Yeah, one of those movies. It doesn't, I don't think, like, it's not clear that it's Amy and Jordan, but it is interesting, you know? It's one of those things where it's like, well, like, this guy's films are considered important, and like this is a portion of that, you know, whether or not be like official or not. But and that's not a reason to keep that book in print either. I guess I'm just saying that there's like significant recognition of like how amazing that guy is, and like,
And I guess to
his largest maybe body of work is not available. There's a you know, I feel like there's more Amy and Jordan than there is of any of the other book, you know, projects specifically. Maybe I'm wrong. That's a weird way to look at that material. But anyways, I just feel like that material, that somebody like that, it just boggles the mind, you know? It's like, oh, sorry guys, James Joyce is out of print. He's a little hard to read, you know? It's not real like third grader picked it up and like, you know, dude was talking about his dick or something, you know, it's fucking pervert. Fucking, that's a third grader. The fucking psycho. I mean, it's as dumb as that, you know, where it's like, you don't like let that fucking, you know, you don't like Melville. Who gives a fuck what you like, you know? I mean, Shel Silverstein's the best writer you ever read. Cool. I'm not going to argue with that. But I mean, if someone thinks Shel Silverstein's not even a writer, like, I think that person's a ding dong, but like, whatever, let it be, you know? I mean, Thurber's not a fucking cartoonist. He's a humorist. It's like, I don't give a shit, like, whatever fucking, how you do your home library, you know? I guess that's what I was getting at earlier. You know, like, that's your own thing. Non-alphabetical, out of fucking order, like, whatever, dude. It doesn't fucking matter. Like, so, I mean, yeah, I think that books like that, though, for comics, like, shit, dude, do we need like 6 Avengers titles coming out? I don't expect Marvel to get their act together and start putting out fucking Amy and Jordan. But, you know, what I'm saying is that, like, there's a shitload of paper being printed with comics on it that is sort of, you know, I mean, sort of, again, it's like the same sort of things over and over again. It's like Captain America leads the team on this book, Hawkeye leads the team on that book, Storm's actually the leader of this Avengers, like, if you can believe that, she's an X-Man, holy shit, you know? And it's like, can we fucking not get Amy and Jordan book? Can someone not put like a fucking 1,000 copies in print, you know?
But
like,
to kind of tie things together, I think Mark Beyer is a good example of what you're talking about. Someone who Mark Beyer doesn't self-publish that much. As far as I know, he's those books are going to come out if someone works with him to make the books come out, you know. And I think that gets at a lot of
right. He's got other shit going on.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess he's busy fucking, you know, hopefully continuing to be a fucking beautiful, amazing artist that fucking, you know, I love his shit. That's why I think it should be in print, you know, because I love it. And, you know, I mean, honestly, it's like that thing I said earlier, where it's like I'm trying to not like go for like eat like the low hanging fruit, like, you know, like everyone wants to date the fucking head cheerleader or some shit like that, you know. It's just like that's the person who probably needs the least amount of dudes hitting on them, I guess, you know, like it's probably not like a likely person to go to the dance with you, dude. Like, and for fucking, you know, whatever, maybe you're just not their cup of tea. That's fine. I mean, good Lord, like, look around you. You're surrounded by amazing people every fucking where you go. I mean, yeah, if you just want to just hate on something, that's easy. That's fucking easy. But I mean, damn, if you're gonna hate on something and it's art, then be an artist, please. That's what artists do, is fucking puke the fucking venom out, you know? Like, I don't need that from a fucking editor or a publisher, a comics critic. What you don't like, what you don't like. I don't give a fuck what you don't like. Oh, sorry, Tim, I don't like carrots. That hasn't to do shit, dude. I'm gonna buy some fucking carrots, you know? I mean, these are not relevant. You know, I mean, if something's important to you, you know, you can back it. It's not that hard. I'm not saying Mark Byers, like, you know, wants you to publish his books. Maybe these are his choices. Maybe he's like, no more Amy and Jordan for you fucking cretins or whatever, you know, not down the people of Crete, but you know, it's just whatever. Like, I don't know what his kick is. And yeah, maybe he doesn't want to go fucking stand the fucking, you know, photocopy machine, or like figure out how to do a fucking, you know, whatever, Amazon print on demand or something like that. Like, whatever, you know, it's fine. I'd rather it turn out to be an art book, but I'd rather it came out, period. I'd rather some people come in and ask me for stuff, and I do ask them what they want and what they like. And there have been a number of people where it's just like, I mean, every day I'm like, damn, I wish I could hand them this. Like, you look at these comics journal lists, or like you read Bubbles or something, and everybody gives you their tops. Bubbles is different. That's top 10 of the last year. That might actually be active materials. Right. But like those comics journal or Time magazine lists of like 100 most whatevers of all time, you know, and it's like that even those fucking lists don't keep those books in print, you know? The journal would put that fucking list out, and there'd be fandom books on that list that weren't in print that they also didn't reprint after that, which I'm not saying that they should, but it's just, that's sort of the state of it, you know? Like, a book comes out and that's fucking it. Like, kind of just disappears. And unless it just immediately goes like fucking napalm level all over the whole fucking comics community, it probably doesn't get a second, third, fourth, fifth printing, you know? I mean, that's, I think just culturally, that's an unfortunate state. So, I mean, you know, I think that's the same thing across the board, though. Like, your favorite cartoonist has works that are out of print. Cartoonists that are the most famous cartoonists on earth have works that are out of print, you know? It's just kind of, it's just ridiculous. I wish that I feel like I could, at the comic shop level, make a big difference if I had, you know, more of those books available. There's a certain type of audience that comes in. It's usually dudes that are in their like late teens to like early 30s. And they kind of outline these kind of cool, like sci-fi, like stuff they like, you know, something cool. It's vague, you know, it's kind of, you know, it's not like a full meathead thing, but it is sort of just like a dude looking for like a cool movie or a cool something to check out, you know, something to get stoked on. And I could kind of just invariably over and over and over tell these guys We3, which is this Grant Morrison, Frank Quietly comic book that DC put out on their weirdo line Vertigo when they made interesting stuff. And like this book, like I could just sell this to these dudes. Like, this is a type of dude, you know, likes anime, doesn't really read comics, you know. And you know, these guys got like, you know, quasi sport wear on, but they don't seem like they're actually fully athletic, although they seem semi-jocular. This book was just an automatic browse. I'd show him a bunch of books, but that book was just like bam, bam, bam. Like I could just sell week 3 like this. I could probably sell, I'd work 3 or 4 shifts a week, and I could probably sell 2 or 3 of them. Like just, that's a pretty fast selling graphic novel, in like just year through. And then eventually it stopped being in print. And it's just like, man, I have these guys still come in all the time. Every fucking week I have these guys come in. And I invariably wind up giving them something, but I show them World of Adina. They don't buy it, like I could show them some other Frank Quietly book also. They don't go for it. But man, We 3 was just like a special book that way. And it's like, I don't know who fucking has the control of that. That's not my point. My point just being that there's just all this shit. Like there's an audience for it. There's like a audience that's way fucking deeper than you can fathom. This book that I'm looking at over your shoulder, Austin, I can't point at your screen and be in it, but you have the Kill Offer book behind
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That fucking book, dude. I mean, holy shit. I mean, is that back in print, or did you just like find a little treasure trove?
I'm
trying to tip your hand here.
Is it back in print? No, it's not back in print, but the publisher still has some copies.
That book, in my experience, sells itself.
Oh yeah, people love it.
I could just sit that on the table, Floating World, and that thing would just walk itself fucking right up to the cash register, fucking no problem. I wouldn't have to fucking point my finger at it or anything like that, and there's a lot of people that think that book is disgusting and don't want to have anything to do with it and go like, ugh. But I mean, that book is for someone like me, or, for people who have some sort of like interest in that material. I mean, that thing's solid gold. That thing is just like, dude, there's no fucking giant book of like Tom Bunk, I mean, there's just, what the fuck is, I can do this all day. I could go to any of the bookshelves here in my house and pull off a fucking bunch of books that I think you should read. And they don't.
Let's do that next time. That would be a good.
They'd all be out of print. And that's why that's no good. Comics has the arsenal. We have the fucking catalog. The form has the catalog. It's there. We don't need to like, who's gonna fucking save comics? Fucking Scholes did that shit for you. The Great American Novel, like, eat shit. It's already fucking there. I know I'm telling you to eat shit while you read Peanuts, but I mean, come on, dude. Like, it's all there. Like, if the fucking farm did fall apart and all the cartoonists got wiped off the face of the earth, like, and the comics were still there, like, it's a dope language. There's all this amazing comics. It's just all of it's kind of like, we don't have enough Bill Blackbeards. We don't have enough Dylan Williamses, like these are, people that kind of can keep the quality of the form up, that can keep the language alive. I mean, you mentioned something about like someone's not ready to get published at the beginning. I think Frankie Santoro is probably the source of that kind of odd quote. Frankie believes in a right way. Frankie believes in like a path, he's got a list no. He's got a list of no on both sids of him,
Very, very
he's like building a fucking brick wall along the path, which, for somebody who needs a path, that may behoove them, to go Frankie's way. But like, he's got a way of seeing it that is like his heart, which is open to comics, which like loves all kinds of comics. Frankie's got an immense love for comics, and he cares about so much shit. But he's also so, Destroy All Comics. By the way, there's a fucking magazine. It's done. Like, can we just reprint that as a big fucking book, please? That book, Destroy All Comics, the magazine, as just a single book. Please, God, just, it's a black and white magazine as far as I recall, except for the covers. Like, it's not like it would be an expensive product. That would, I think, change the course of comics again. Still,
just putting one of them back, I think people would be interested. But this is when Jeff and Dylan.
But yeah, to Frankie.
But Frankie's from this era.
Yeah, but I mean, like, Frankie's got this perspective that's like this way, the right way. He like has all his grids and his fucking seashells and shit and stuff like that, which is, it's cool, you know. I mean, I don't need to know like how a fucking Porsche drives to like go to the grocery store and the fucking thing, you know. I can kind of remember how to drive a stick shift without grinding the gears, fingers crossed, you know. I mean, it's, you know, I don't know why Tintin works, but like I actually could probably sit there and argue why it works all day. But my point is I'm not trying to push on that. And I know that Franky's deal is like solidifying this stuff with rules. So I mean, yeah, when he says that, like, I don't know who, and I don't want to know really who he thinks wasn't ready. But that's neither here nor there. You know, whoever said that, I feel like I heard Jesse Law say the same thing about one of Dylan's publications, where it's like, you know, so and so is not ready for that, you know, and it's just like, like, dude, give me a fucking break. Like, this comic kills, you know. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's so bizarre. Like, what's the path? Like, who's ready? Like, that's just your own thing, dude. That's just your own path. Like, that's got nothing to do with the form. Like that when you get these list of rules, that's how you get like a dead language, you know? I mean, that's how you get fucking like Latin or some shit that you don't fucking speak, right? Like, it's fucking dead. Like, yeah. Like, you know, like this is more like a pigeon language where it's like, let's fucking freak it out, you know? Let's like stick other languages in it, you know? Let's cut it apart, and, you know, it fucking still keeps going, you know? It's like, I don't want to fucking put it in a cage. I don't want to lock it down. I don't want to like code its fucking DNA, you know? I mean, fuck that, dude. Let's fucking roll. Like, let's do something, you know? Like, let's make something. Like, let's eat. Like, let's go somewhere. Let's talk. Let's share or whatever. Like, you know, I mean, maybe that's the thing about the physical comics for me versus the digital comics, is that like I'm not touching it, you know? I don't have that physical affection for my glassy phone or whatever. You know, maybe I'm just tactile that way. But, you know, like, it's art. Like, you know, I got in trouble when I was a kid and I saw the Monet exhibit. I got too close. The alarm went off a bunch of times before I realized it was me, you know? Like, I want to like fucking get right, you know? It's not like I necessarily need glasses. I mean, I kind of do, but, you know, I want to like get in there, you know? I want to be having the relationship with the art. So
that's
yeah.
I think that's a good thought to rein things in on. And I think these ideas that comics we have, I think that's an important comics. We have the canon, we did it, it's there. It just needs to, there's no one needs to save it except the work being made. And it's not comics. We made the work. It's not a dead language. It's not Latin. It's alive, and and the way to the contact the way to counter the internet would be just to make the work, just to publish the work.
You do, or just make comics, or if you can't make comics, help comics that you love move forward, you know, help them get out, you know. I mean, and maybe that is the internet though. Maybe that's like your fucking Kickstarters and shit. Like, that's really great, you know? Like, I hear people like pulling better dough at a Kickstarter than they did out of any publisher that they ever worked with. Awesome, great. I wish that those fucking comics like still came around. The Kickstarters, they feel like they're finite, you know? Like,
yeah,
I published it, got my $2,000, and like,
no, that's the big problem.
400 people, and it's like, I'm glad you got the dough, but I want to fucking, you know, like, you know, there's a couple Shaky Cane ones where I'm like, I want this in the store. I want this in the store so badly, you know? And it's like, they're not out and about in the distro, but this is the weeds of comics distro, you know? I mean, move forward, like, just, you know, help yourself or help somebody else. But I mean, there isn't like, you know, if you don't like somebody, like, you don't need to have a big fight about it, you know? I mean, just go make your own comics. Like, and I definitely get in fights with people about comics, but like, that's like, you know, we are all kind of digging the same thing roughly.
I agree. Thank you, Tim. I think arguing is good. I think it's important.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
thank you so much for this, and thank you to people who asked
Yeah,
questions.
I mean, I don't want to hurt people's feelings. I do feel bad about that.
No, and also, you know, we had this.
Oh yeah, and sorry we didn't.
We had this plan to do this as a discussion rather than you doing a presentation, and I think it worked out really, really well, and it was a real pleasure. And thank you for your time, Sam. I love doing it. And I want to say to everybody that's here that next week is the last installment of this season of the New York Comic Symposium. We'll be back in January. Our last talk of this season is Heather Faye Khan. So that'll be next Tuesday. And then we will come back in January with we'll have Victor Cairo. Sam, that'll be a good one.
Yeah.
That one will be good. So thanks everybody. And I'm going to say goodbye. And thank you so much for your time, Tim. And it was great. It was a pleasure. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. I had a good time.
All right. Bye, everybody. Bye, Tim.
Bye, Austin. Thank you.
Thank you.